Namaskar, this is Professor Agarwal from Indian Institute of Finance, and we bring you here another webinar on the how to research. This is the third in series for hosting on research itself, and actually seventh on research, but fourth in the series of how to research. We are hosting this series one after the other, and we will be hosting more in the coming weeks. Today we have our guests from again all over the world. We have Europe represented by Charles from Belgium. We have Thenmozhi representing India. We have also other people like Yamini representing India. And then we have from East Asia, we have, if I pronounce it wrong, Indrasari from Indonesia, who is representing her university. And then we have Shantanu, who would be delivering the valedictory address. The opening address would be given by our chairman, Honorable Professor Dr. J.D. Agarwal, who is also the editor-in-chief of Finance India. So to begin with, just to give a few disclaimers here, I would like for everybody to kindly keep a note that we are observing the Zoom meetings in accordance with the norms laid out by the Ministry of Home Affairs for conducting Zoom meetings to avoid any kind of Zoom bombing. And as a measure, we have placed on restriction in terms of usage of chat box as well as the usage of the videos and audios during the meeting. We will open up videos of other participants when we have the question answer session at the end around 8 o'clock. And since the session is from 6 to 8, we would like to contain everybody in the span of about 10 to 15 minutes of their address so that we can have questions 10 to 15 minutes for question answers towards the end. The views represented here are the views of the speakers in their individual capacities, both as speaker and as well as a moderator, and not those institutions they represent. The views are going to be based on the research work, their research findings, their life works, which they have done personally and should be taken in personal capacity and not of the institutions which they represent. I thought I would like to make this disclaimer. And before I begin, I would like to very warmly welcome all my guests. Just to save a little bit of time, I thought I would like to introduce my guests briefly, and then we will introduce them later as well. I would like to introduce our chairman. He is chairman and distinguished professor of finance from Indian Institute of Finance. He is the editor-in-chief of Finance India, Professor J.D. Agarwal, who will give us the opening welcome address. Then we have, followed by, we will have Professor Charles, who will be from Belgium, who is an emeritus professor of accounting and finance from University of Namur, Belgium. I've known him for good 20-25 years now. He's also a guest professor at the Albert Ludwig University in Germany, and he is also the editorial board member of Finance India for good 20 years now. Followed by, we will have Professor Thenmozhi, a very prominent name within the country in the area of capital markets, stock markets, and so on and so forth. And she has been a professor of finance at the Indian Institute of Technology at IIT Madras, and which is based in south of India. And then a former director, just till recently, the former director of the National Institute of Securities Market, which is under the Bombay Stock Exchange and SEBI as regulator. He has a lot of, and we have been fortunate to have her on our editorial board as well. She has also contributed in terms of large number of papers which have got published in the past in the journal. Followed by Thenmozhi, we will have Dr. Meithiana Indrasari. She is the vice president of Seotomo University. I'm sorry if I pronounce the name wrongly. Please do correct me at a later time. But it is based in Indonesia. She is a young dynamic person who is the vice president of Seotomo University. She is also the editor-in-chief of the Singeri International Journal, which is coming out of Indonesia. All our speakers today are editorial board members of top-notch journals, which are Scopus, Web of Sciences, and various other UGs listed worldwide. So it is not that they are not, but I have not given the time frame we have in hand, and we would like to listen to more of them. So I would like to contain my introduction. They are very prominent people. You can go and look at them, Google them out as well. Then I am followed by that is Professor Dr. Bhaskar Somani, a person who studied with me long back in school at the Delhi Public School, a colleague of mine, a co-student fellow of mine, He is now the Professor of Urology at University Hospital Southampton in United Kingdom, and also consultant of Indology in University Hospital and editor of the Turkish Journal of Urology, apart from being president of various associations of urology and others based out of the UK. Followed by Bhaskar would be Yamini. Professor Dr. Yamini Agarwal is a professor of the Indian Institute of Finance. She is on deputation to the IIF Business School, a sister institution of Indian Institute of Finance. She is currently the professor and director of IIF Business School, which is under Abdul Kalam Technical University, offering their MBA programs and other programs. She is also Dean Research at the Indian Institute of Finance and also the Associate Editor of Finance India. Apart from this, she sits on various boards of companies or various chambers, and she is very active in terms of addressing various forums. All of my speakers, as I said, are addressing various forums as keynote speakers. Followed by which I have Mr. Shantanu Bhadkamar, who is the president of the Multimodal Transport Operators of India, which is one of the largest transport operators organization in the country. He is also owner of 3 organizations. One is the ATC, then the Rotomatic Containers Private Limited, and the ATC Global Logistics from the early 1980s. And he is also the vice chairman of the China International Logistic Professional Network, which is based out of China. He is also the immediate past president or chairman managing committee member of the following chambers. He is the past president of Maharashtra Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, one of the leading chambers coming out of Maharashtra, which is the main headquartered in Mumbai, as is known as Bombay, to a large part of the community around the world. Then he's also the immediate past president of the International Federation of Customs Brokers, which is based out of Canada, and he's also the current past chairman of the Federation of Freight Forward Associations of India. Apart from this, he is on various boards and has a research bent of mind. So I thought he is a very good combination of practical uses of research, bringing things in framework. He is someone who has actually practically put things in place, and also sitting on various boards of organizations, chambers, and someone I've known for almost over a decade now, who has so much interest in education and research. So I thought it would be very nice if we can have him to deliver the valedictory address today. Earlier I had thought of Bala, but he is not been feeling well. And then Fred, who was supposed to come in, who is our editorial board member also from Colombia, is having some problem with the time frame. So that's why we could not have him today, but we will have him at other occasions. I have requested another colleague of mine, who is Professor Dr. Saurabh Agarwal. He is the principal of IIF College of Commerce and Management Studies, another sister institution of the Indian Institute of Finance, under the Chaudhry Charan Singh University, earlier called Meerut University, offering undergraduate programs and even postgraduate programs, hopefully soon. Both BBA, BCom, and other programs which we have applied for there. He is also member board of the Employee State Insurance Corporation, the ESIC, which is the largest organization looking after the benefits of employees, and have set up a large number of hospitals and other frameworks throughout the country. And as I know that he goes around inspecting and sitting on various other boards of various companies and all. He is also the member of the governing body of the DTNBWE, which is formerly called the CBWE, a workers' employee organization, which is again under the Ministry of Labor and Employment. He is also managing committee member of SOCHM, which is one of the largest chambers in the country, and also the associate editor of Finance India. With that brief introduction, I would like to begin my introduction to the webinar, the workshop we are hosting today. Thank you, Mithali. You have a beautiful background with our program displayed there, so I don't need a copy of the program in hand. I would like to thank all my guests who have come today to be addressing the forum today. As I said, it's a great pleasure and an honor to welcome everybody. We, as I said, brought this thing in focus beginning mid of April 2020, where we wanted to induce positivity in the environment, and hence we started a series on essence of life and growth. And then we started a large number of webinars and workshops and training programs in a virtual mode. And the prime objective was to bring about, because research is something which is very core to the Indian Institute of Finance. Almost about 60% of the activities of the Indian Institute of Finance based on research, and Finance India is only a small component of that research finding which we do. I would go on to them a little later, but I thought I must introduce. So earlier we have organized two of the series of how to do research. One was on to how to publish in top journals, Scopus listed journals and Web of Sciences. The other one was on publish or perish. And today, which we are organizing, is going to be an empirical and theoretical work. How do you go about doing it? So I have people who do all kinds of work before us who are going to present their views. And the next one in the series of the how to research would be on policy work and social contributing research, which will be hopefully next week or next to next week in the mid of July. With that, I would like to open the house. I would request Professor J.D. Agarwal to kindly unmute himself so that we could actually listen to his opening welcome address and have him address us for about 10 to 15 minutes, after which we will go to Charles. And as I gave you the order, we will go in the same order from one speaker to the other. But for now, we would like to listen to our Honorable Chief Editor and the welcome host of our webinar, Professor Dr. J.D. Agarwal. Professor Agarwal.
Good evening, everybody. It's a matter of pleasure for me to welcome you all, the honorable speakers, well-known researchers from around the world, the participants who are keenly interested to know how to research both empirical and theoretical. It's really very interesting and important that Indian Institute of Finance is organizing to promote research, how to do research. Most often in my 50 years career as a professor, I found that researchers are at some difficulty and try to find out ways and means as to how to do research. They keep on wondering where to go, and how to proceed further so as to finish his research quickly. Of course, a few important points which I would like to share. Of course, we have experts who would be talking about it and giving you inputs on as to how to do research. One of the most important thing, in my opinion, for anybody who is a researcher is to find out an appropriate research supervisor or guide. Depending upon the subject in which he has developed some interest, after reading literature, his own mind, his own thinking, then he needs to find out a supervisor. That's one aspect. Because the second important thing is the university. If one wants to build up a career in research, it is not just a PhD. What is more important is that who is the research supervisor and what is the university where one is enrolled. Because the environment of the university would help him excel in conducting research. And that's a very important aspect. So the university and the supervisor, of course, the subject, that is the discipline. If one wants to do in finance, then it is always good to pick up somebody who is an expert or well-known in the area of finance, research in particular, because there is a difference in teaching those who are very excellent professors and there are others who are very good researchers or excellent researchers. That's one aspect of it. But of course, the research has much wider arena really to look at. There is a policy research where you have immediately some problems and you need to really find out a solution, and that research and then come out with a paper, white paper or a research paper where you can suggest a policy prescription. There it is supposed to be quick, but of course you are not a supervisor, but you are a team of people who meet together to conduct that type of research. There are consultancy firms who do research for organizations. That is also a part of the research. But probably what Indian Institute of Finance meant here was those who are interested to pursue their PhD program, those who want to build up their career in the area of research, those who want to excel and contribute to their discipline and also to their nation. Now, then it is necessary for them to understand how to do this. So finding out a research supervisor, finding out a topic, finding out a university, and then conducting a lot of survey. But one of the best ways to conduct the surveys is to prepare a bibliography in the area. One should prepare at least 20 to 25 pages of bibliographies in searching the literature, which means one searches the journals, one searches books, and prepare a bibliography. Finance India prepares and gives extensive bibliography on one of the areas of finance and accounting. It also gives contents of over 100 periodicals of the articles published in different areas in the last 1 quarter. That means over the last 32 years, it has published over about 122 bibliographies on different subjects of economics, finance, and accounting, and even management. There, some of the latest subject topics have been picked up. It can become very handy for a researcher to look at the Finance India, which is available in most of the libraries around the world. Then one can also look at the contents of the current period, searching about 100 journals, publishing articles in various disciplines like economics, commerce, finance, and accounting is a difficult job, particularly in developing countries like India or other developing countries. In that situation, one can probably go through the contents of current periodicals published in Finance India. Finance India also publishes about 8 book reviews in each issue, which is a quarterly journal, which means it has already published a large number of book reviews. It has also given an annotated listing of books which have been published in different areas. Now, that means it becomes handy for a person to first of all prepare a bibliography. After that, then he can probably from there, one can see there are some people who are publishing repeatedly, and their name appears 3 times, 4 times, 10 times on the same subject. Now, the subject in which you want to pursue research, I think those people who have been repeatedly contributing towards research in that area will be something worthwhile, and going through some of their work would probably open up various avenues of one's brain to see what kind of research is possible. Then what is important is to identify one's objective. Another thing is to find out one's own constraints. At the same time, he needs to see the researches which have been done, where are areas which have been left out by the researchers in the past. Because most of the researchers, even while they are writing articles, they would always try to point out that a part has not been have been left out by them, either because of the time constraint or because of the resource constraint, or they suggest that these are the areas in which further research is possible. Now, I think that probably becomes handy. Then one can discuss with one's peers, one's supervisor, or maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 people in that area who are professors and are available to discuss with them and find out. Once he is able to decide, because choosing its topic is very important, and then finding out what are the difficulties or what are the gaps in the literature in that area, and those gaps need to be identified and discussed with peers in the classroom, because there are some universities which suggest that you have to pursue some coursework before starting writing the thesis or searching the thesis. That it is worthwhile to go to a library. Most libraries all over the world have dissertations which have been completed in that university or in other universities. For instance, Indian Institute of Finance has over 300 PhD dissertations completed in different universities in India. Now, if one goes through some of those dissertations and they are classified, then one can know how the research has been done, what is the research methodology selected, how many chapters are to be included, and what need to be included in that research thesis, because that will really clear up many of the doubts. And of course, the universities and the supervisors make every possible attempt to make a researcher at home. But besides that, in between, many moments come when he gets frustrated. He loses his interest. Many times he feels, well, I should leave because I have entered into a thick forest where from it is difficult for me to get out or come out. Now, I think that is not probably the right thing. The right thing is, once one is committed to a thing, one will be able to achieve his objectives, provided he is committed to it. Commitment to that job is very necessary. And then, in my opinion, what is most equally important is, when one is progressing through the work, he should review the literature, survey the literature and review, and prepare a thorough, comprehensive literature review article. That article he should present, he should discuss, and he should also send for possible publication in acknowledged and well-known journals who are very regular. Many of the journals published by the universities or in the universities, we find there are two difficulties. One, that they are not regular. If it is a quarterly journal, they are not regularly published. If it is bi-yearly, it is not published bi-yearly. If it is yearly, even yearly, it is not published. Sometimes there are delays for 2 to 3 years. That is one aspect. The second aspect which I have come across in the last 50 years of my career is that journals, when you send them, sometimes they take ordinarily too long a time to revert back to tell you whether your article is likely to be accepted for possible publication or not. Because if it is taking too long, then your data, the empirical analysis, the results, the recommendations, and the conclusions may become old, and that may not be good. But at the same time, of course, there is some time which is supposed to be taken, which is necessary. There are some journals which are picked up by the press. The articles published in journals are picked up by the press. They are picked up by other researchers, and they are also picked up by the government for policy making. Now, if you know about such journals, then probably it is good, because then your article or research paper which you publish there will get immediately an attention from the public, and you really get a kind of satisfaction that the journal, that my article has been picked up. I know many articles which have been published in Finance India have been picked up by the press, and government picked up those articles and then try to follow various policies, adopted various policies based upon those researches which have been done and published. Because the research which has been done, if it is just converted into a thesis and then it decorates the library of the university, probably it is not serving the purpose. It is a result of a very, very hard work of a researcher. And then it must make positive contributions, either to promote the same discipline, to add another brick, or to construct a new building, or renovate altogether that subject. And therefore, now that contribution, the fruits of that research will be known only if it is recognized and it is accepted and it is adopted by either researchers or by other organizations for whom it is meant. I think these are a few points in the opening I thought I should share with you. I do not want to take too long, But at the same time, I must warn or I must suggest that when one is getting into a research, whether it is for PhD or post-PhD, or it is otherwise if one's own interest to do research, there may be many moments where one gets frustrated, either non-availability of data or for many other reasons, one should not leave it. Once you committed to it, you are sure to get the results and you will really succeed. I wish you very well for all those who are interested to learn how to do research by both the empirical and theoretical. I once again welcome the honorable distinguished speakers. I see Charles. After a long time, I could see him here in this Zoom meeting. I could see many other friends who are here to be speaking. And I'm glad that IIF has been able to convince them to come and speak to you so that you can have the advantage of researchers from different parts of the world. And I think I must compliment Aman to give me an opportunity to share my views on this subject, although I have tried to be as brief as possible so that the distinguished speakers can share much more details with you. Thank you, Aman, and thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Agarwal, for that address. It's very kind of you to introduce and welcome everybody and kickstart the seminar, the workshop on the how to research empirical and theoretical. We will, as I said, go to first Charles. I was trying to find out a more detailed. Charles doesn't only have a theoretical inflow. I know that he sits on various company boards in Europe and has done a large number of research projects across the globe. So that's something which is there. But as I told you, we have met Charles almost about 20-25 years back at various European Finance Conference meetings, and we have had him with us. He's become more of a family member in terms of more than just a colleague. He's, as I said, he's more like a family. Whenever I requested him for anything, he is someone who has never said no to me. He is an emeritus professor at the University of Namur, which is a beautiful city in Belgium, not far away from Brussels and away from the noise which Brussels makes anymore. So that's something which I loved when I visited the city. When he hosted one of the European conferences, it is a university which was there. As I said, he's also not only a guest professor at a German university, but also member of boards of various companies and also doing a large number of European projects. He is also an honored member on the editorial board of Finance India. I would go to Charles. To begin with my address, I would request Charles if he can kindly begin with his views on how to research empirical and theoretical. Charles, over to you.
Thank you, Eamon, and good evening, everybody. I'm very honored to be in this prestigious company. And I think your project is really in itself an entrepreneurial project, hosting these webinars. Most of us in the panel and in the audience probably are involved in research and teaching in economics and finance probably. Thank God there is at least one professor of medicine. That's marvelous. But as was my case, I've been teaching finance and particularly entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial finance. And gradually that has made me think more and more of research as an entrepreneurial process too. Can I have access to my slides? If I show slides, can you see that? Is that visible now or not?
You can start it yourself from the slideshow share option at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah, okay. And is it visible to everybody now?
It is visible to everybody now.
Okay, great. Well, in a sense, I'm capitalizing on my own experience as both an academic researcher and to some extent also a bit of a practitioner in finance and entrepreneurship. Of course, I've always been trying to find research funding for my own research and my team. But then on the other hand, growing older, I have always also have to participate in the board of grant awarding bodies. So I have been selecting applicants. I've also been lucky enough to be a co-founder of university spin-offs, companies that were born from university laboratories in biotech especially, where we had to find growth funding for these companies. And then now, as an emeritus, I am involved in VC investment, so in selecting projects submitted by young companies that want to finance their growth. So I've really been on both sides of the balance sheet, and in all these functions, I think planning as an entrepreneurial project has been a major issue. So I hope, yeah. And you know, an entrepreneurial project is generally planned in terms of a business plan, okay? We won't talk of a business plan here in research, but I would call it rather a research plan. You know, you all know the major steps in a business plan. Well, I've transferred that in a sense to a research plan. I think it's generally applicable. You have the big categories, of course, analysis of the market and the competition, of the organization and the people, of the promotion also, although that may be a bit iconoclastic in research. And then, of course, the main issue for me today, how do you finance your research? And in the end, your goal, of course, that is publications, what journals do we target, and what are the deadlines? If I take the first slide of that business plan, become research plans, you could be either a PhD student or a senior researcher, whatever. Finding a good research topic takes time. So don't expect to start on a Monday morning a new project. As Professor Agarwal has said, that you need preparing that carefully, reading, listening to people, etc. So take your time, spot trends. I think trends in research are important, undoubtedly, but then try also uncharted grounds. I think perhaps too many researchers are on the same trends. That can be helpful to get into journals, but believe me, sometimes, no, very often, originality pays. And I would just recommend you a book that I've always loved, and it's called Blue Ocean Strategy. Many of you may know it before, by Professor Kim and Moborn of INSEAD Business School. It pushes you from sort of a red ocean of bloody competition to a blue ocean of a new untapped research space where you are, I will not say you're not alone, but you have a much wider and you're much freer in your research. It will be an advantage also once you get to public. Second line then, of course, is people and skills. Generally, you know your own skills, so that's relatively easy. It's not always easy to perfectly understand the skills of the people in your team. And then you should define, of course, the skills and competencies that you need for a given research that you want to start. That may be quantitative competencies, statistical, mathematical, but also more and more qualitative research. And that may be present in an individual or in a team. Now, if you need more additional skills, you can do that, of course, through personal development, faculty development, as is mentioned in this seminar, FDP, Faculty Development Program. You could also hire people if you have that possibility, collaborate with other teams. The issue is having the skills, having the competencies to carry out a given research. And then, of course, as a team leader, if you're a senior academic, you will have to take care of managing that team. That can take quite some time. The coordination, the administration, the budgeting. All of us senior researchers know how much time that can take, of course. That promotion issue is maybe a bit a touchy subject because it seems not to belong to academic research, and nevertheless, I think it's very important. So make yourself known, attend research workshops, seminars, webinars like this, international conferences, but also, as one of our colleagues, a British colleague, told us in a previous webinar, make use of social media. It's a new or recent phenomenon, of course, for the last 10, 15 years. There are now specialized social media in research, such as ResearchGate or Mendeley, ORCID. But of course, you can also use traditional like LinkedIn or Twitter. It's a side effect, but it's important. And it makes that you will broaden your network. Try to create buzz, because reputation is really important. It's important for your participation in other teams. It's important for the employability of your PhD researchers who will be on the market, on the job market as future academics. So take that into account. It is very important. It's not an essential goal, but you should take care of it. And then, of course, we get to the crucial issue of funding. You all know that there are maybe three sources of research funding. Direct government funding if you are in a government-sponsored university. Otherwise, of course, it's private funding from that university. Then you have indirect funding through a lot of government agencies, intermediate private institutions or government institutions, etc. And finally, there are research contracts from government or private funding sources, but that's mostly applied research. It's more difficult to get publications out of this type of program. For PhDs, very often they will be active as a teaching or research assistant, which is of course a nice job, but it will make your PhD in itself slower, because often your PhD, unfortunately, it's considered as a side business. And so if you can get a PhD scholarship or a grant, of course, that is a fast track. But not easy. It's highly selective. There are many applicants. You need already a good grade record. You graduate from a good university, have good recommendation letters. Let me stress that. Recommendation letters are extremely important, especially in an Anglo-Saxon environment. And try to get recommendation letters from really well-known people, but also critical people whose recommendation will be valued. You may need a language test also, and sometimes an interview. An interview for a PhD scholarship is a bit like a job interview, so prepare for that, because it may take the form of some sort of comprehensive examination, which is, of course, very complex. You cannot really very much prepare for that, but at least know your proposed subject very well. And then, if you get a grant, of course, mind the milestones that you will have to meet in that project, because it's important for the scholarship provider. Once you get your PhD and you get to the postdoc stage, be aware that you have to plan your landing as a PhD well in advance, 1, maybe 2 years early, which makes it very important to have early on already a reasonably good publications, okay? Because it will, one, create some buzz for you, and you can present those publications or at least those papers in conferences, etc. And conferences are also, to some extent, a job market. There are a number of postdoc grants or fellowships. Apply for those. I think it's interesting if you can have 2 years on top of your PhD to finish your publications and get the whole project into good journals. But then start looking ahead. Do you want to stay in academia, or will you go to government or international institutions, banking, finance, etc.? There is quite some demand for PhDs in finance especially, but also in physics or whatever. PhD in physics and mathematics are highly regarded in finance too. If you decide to go for an academic tenure track appointment, it's not easy either, so it's always a bit harder to get every day. You need a good CV again, and also visibility recommendations again. Of course, if you have 1A publication, that will be really helpful, but it's not easy to get at. Especially if you're lucky to be invited for a job interview and give a presentation, you will have to show both your research capability and, to some extent, your teaching capability. So that is quite a challenge. Try to show how you will fit into an existing team, because that is very important. A university is normally hiring to enlarge an existing team. So try to get information about that team so that you can show that you would fit into that team. You may have to reconsider, of course, your research interest, because your PhD research will not necessarily fit into your new institution. So you will have to adapt your plan, your research plan. Senior academics, of course, will probably write less and less papers themselves and be more and more involved in attracting funds and managing their team. And you know, you have to tap second flow financing by government agencies. More and more research is financed by international agencies. I know the EU situation better, the EU Horizon Europe, which starts from this year, or the grants from the European Research Council, for instance, the ERC. I know the UKRI in the UK is active also with India. Many of these research programs entail international collaborations, so it's important to manage that. And also, again, that's why I think it's important to have a good reputation and be visible in the research market, because you will have to apply, and applying and being selected is also to some extent being known. All the bodies where I have been involved, I knew almost in advance, having read all the applications, which ones would be accepted, because once an institution has a valuable track record in certain fields, new projects will have a very high probability to be accepted too. So it's very important to build a reputation. Again, I repeat it, for senior academics, that entails quite an administrative burden. So try to tap your university research administration to help you, okay? Help you also find financing opportunities, managing the follow-up, managing the budgeting, managing the reporting for the milestones. It's a very heavy activity, and the reporting deadlines are extremely important. If you don't meet your reporting deadlines, your reputation may be damaged. And having been on both sides, I know that it's often difficult to meet the deadlines, but it's also, when you're the grant provider, sometimes very difficult to get the reports. And although sometimes from prestigious research centers, it can be very difficult to get the report. the final goal, of course, that should be clearly stated in your plan as the previous 4 steps, of course, are the publications you want to get to. And you should from the beginning mention journals where you want to get into. You cannot decide on a Monday morning, I want to go to that or that journal. Okay, you have a strategy, you build a strategy, you talk to experienced researchers who have an experience with that journal, who know the idiosyncrasies of that journal. Every journal has idiosyncrasies, and some people have experience with that. So try to be informed about that. Also, gradually increase your ambition. You will not immediately target an A journal. Also have your papers challenged by demanding people who have experience, and act on their feedback, okay? Because you learn much about that at any age, I must say. I've always been extremely happy to get feedback on papers, and with the modern communication channels, it works pretty well. Of course, blind reviewing is a very slow process, as Professor Agarwal told us. That's true, but you should not wait for that. I mean, you have to share your papers with a lot of people and get experience from other ones. So, as Professor Agarwal said, be patient and keep smiling. Don't get frustrated. He used the word frustration also. It's an issue, but it's an issue in any job, okay? So, yeah. So, concluding, plan. It's very important to plan and execute your plan. A plan is a long-term project, so don't hesitate to plan 5, 10 years ahead, but then you slice it into shorter-term sub-periods, sub-horizons, and you gradually move, of course, your final horizon. Apply that approach to yourself, to you as an individual, and to your team. But I think don't keep your plan in your drawer, keep it on your desk, see it every day, check whether you're realizing it, and I think it's a very good incentive to be effective. Thank you all.
Thank you, Charles, for that brief introduction on how to research and give that perspective of entrepreneurial finance and the way we go about. I would now move to, we will be taking questions at the end, so we will not be taking questions in middle. We will now move to Professor Thenmozhi, but before that, I would like to briefly introduce her, as I did, but I would like to briefly introduce her, and then we will move on to listening to her going on. I hope you're able to see the screen share. Professor Thenmozhi is a professor of finance at Department of Management Studies at Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Chennai, and she has a large number of work which you can see from these links which have been provided on our website. A very active researcher, both empirical and theoretical modeling, which she has been engaged with. Professor Thenmozhi is professor, as I said. She's also been the former director till recently of the National Institute of Securities Market in Mumbai. She obtained a doctorate from University of Madras and research teaching for the last 28 years. She has been working with the faculty, Department of Management Studies at Anna University priority. She specializes in finance and corporate finance, in strategic financial markets, conceptual finance, forecasting and time series modeling, stocks and commodity derivatives. And she has an executive and Endeavour Fellow of Australian government and recipient of the Fulbright Nehru Visiting Professorship and the European Union Erasmus Mundell Scholarship. She is a national award winner for development of best manufacturing policy, draft of India, and the former Prime Minister Shri Vajpayee at the National Manufacturing Sector Policy Competition presented her the award at the FICCIS and We Think India WTI Forum. She is a recipient of the Exim Bank Chair Professorship in Finance offered by the ICCR, which is part of the Ministry of External Affairs, our Government of India. She has international experience with the UPM, Madrid University of Germany, and various schools across the world. You can see from United States to Australia to Beijing, Madrid, every place. She has been a large number of scholars have been doing sensitive work across the world. She's member of several committees of the universities and Women Forum and other task force committees. And her research focus, as I said, are in corporate finance, stock markets, microfinance, financial time series modeling, and so on and so forth. Just this is a brief, you can see it can keep going on. And she's been a Senate member of the ISSER through interim. She's a member of the Equity Derivative Governing Council and the member of the Madras Stock Exchange. So she is not only a person who brings theory to her platform, but she is someone who has practically implemented, and practitioners take her advice very seriously. I now bring before you Dr. Thenmozhi. Over to you, Professor. You're welcome to share your screen. Just a second, I need to unmute you, I think. You can unmute yourself, actually. Yes, please.
So good evening, all of you. And I think it's my pleasure to share my thoughts with you through the IIF webinar, How to Research, Empirical and Theoretical. I think every one of us, particularly as a finance researcher or a finance professor, wanted to have a publication in a top star journal or an A-star journal. I think the first question that comes in, is it possible? I think it is possible, provided we keep trying. So it's important that each one of us try to see in terms of how do I go about doing a high quality research. So I think that is what I thought I'll just focus on today. If you look at research that we do, can be theoretical research, where we can try to look, where we look at in terms of doing a series of literature review, try to develop a hypothesis, or sometimes through a detailed systematic literature review, we come up with some research questions which are unanswered and can lead to further research. Or the outcome of the research can lead to a, the outcome of the research can lead to developing a new hypothesis which needs to be tested. So another broad type of research where we look at is empirical work. Empirical research may be either quantitative or we look at qualitative research. But I would like to emphasize on two other applications, two other areas. One is applied research, where the outcome of the research is useful for firms, either for the market or financial market, or for the regulators or policymakers. I think in recent times, we find that a lot of work is also getting focused on applied research. Another area which is gaining a lot of momentum is policy-driven research, where you try to examine whether the policy has got the real impact or what are the issues in the implementation of the policy, or the research itself leads to the coming up with new policies also. So research can be either theoretical, empirical, or applied or policy-driven, but I would encourage all the researchers to focus more on all the domains, and it's good to experiment in all the areas and then focus on what really is more suitable for them. When you look at the financial market, what are the areas for research or the scope of the themes that comes in is when you look at the market, I think initially if you look at research has been in equity market, then on the debt, then moved on to derivatives, then commodity markets, and now mutual funds is gaining a lot of importance. With more funds are being invested in mutual funds, I think regulations are also increasing. The activities are also increasing. ETFs or the exchange traded funds are there. Now we also look at in terms of investments, not only by individual investors, but also by financial institutions. So we need to understand the way they invest and how they impact the market. Another important area that is gaining a lot of recent attention is the market infrastructure institutions. We have the Bombay Stock Exchange, National Stock Exchange, Multi-Commodity Exchange, and now we are looking at the social exchange. So we find that the way they are functioning and how they operate, I think there's a lot of scope for doing research in this particular area. And alternative investment funds, category 1, category 2, category 3, all the 3 areas are gaining a lot of momentum. And one more important thing along with the market is the trust given to governance. Even investors, either institutional investors as well as individual investors, started looking in terms of how well a company is being governed for making the investments. So we find that there's a lot of interlinkage of governance to the financial markets research. Understanding the investor behavior, looking in terms of how they go about making the investments, what is the type of risk that they're taking. I think these are different areas where research has been happening, and there's a lot of scope for further research in these areas also. I also thought that I highlight that there are different theories in finance which you look at, and I think researchers focus on the different types of theories, understand in terms of how these theories are relevant or how it can be applied and what are the issues involved in applying these. And I would say that it is these theories which have led to the development of finance. So there's a lot of scope in relooking at these and also understanding in terms of how relevant they are whenever we are looking at or framing a research issue and then trying to undertake research. So in recent times, I find that researchers are more keen to take the data, do some analysis and write a paper. But I think it's very important, please, they need to look at in terms of understanding the basic underlying theories behind the rationale and try to relate the rationale to the theory. And then also see in terms of how the research is either contributing to theory, either going to apply the theory or validate the theory or question the theory. And most important thing that I expect is that in future, there are going to be a lot of emerging market theories that are going to be evolved. So far, we have been trying to borrow the theories that's already there and trying to apply it to the Indian scenario. But I think in the future, there's going to be a lot of scope is there where we are going to evolve our own market related theories, which will become more popular and it will be more relevant also. If you look at anyone looking in terms of doing research, theoretical research, there's a lot of scope for doing literature review based work because as you see, a lot of work has been done in these areas like financial reporting, mergers, acquisitions, dividend policy, behavioral finance, valuation. These are all quite common themes in which we find a lot of research is happening here. Even look in terms of, I think, market efficiency, market microstructure, and looking at the volatility of the stock market, looking at in terms of infrastructure financing, investment banking. I think we find that so much of work has been done, but I was just looking at how many studies are there looking at doing literature review or meta-analysis in finance. It's very limited. I think it's time that we also look at some different themes on which we can come up with detailed systematic review of the literature, coming up in terms of what has been done, what are the developments, what are the major findings, and what are the areas where further research has to be done or where there is more mixed results. I think there is a lot of scope for researchers to look at literature review-based papers and all these things. Looking at issues that we can look at in relating to financial markets for empirical work, there are many areas, but I thought I'll highlight only some of them, which may be of interest. One is maybe like to see in terms of what factors are driving the interest rates. Why should a country hold more forex reserves? I think we're having huge forex reserves. What do we do with it? Why should it? I think it's a very interesting area to look into. What is the effect of the macroeconomic policies on the firm's decisions? And why Indian firms are holding a lot of liquid cash? And how does it affect the way the firms are performing? Maybe we also look at in terms of how interest rate swaps can be used for risk management of firms. I think nowadays companies are looking in terms of using IRS. Maybe we can also see in terms of how activity-based pricing is useful in service sector, though we have looked at in the production manufacturing sector, but now we find that this is becoming more popular in the service sector. And relating with the developments of the infrastructure exchanges, we find that how the exchanges should be governed. We also need to look in terms of how the exchanges are being financed and whether there is any scope for further improvement in the way they are being managed. I think there's scope for looking at it. How price limits are being fixed, how it can be optimized. Should there be any relook at the margin limit for trading? How does security lending affect the stock trading? pledge shares are there now, how is affecting the market as well as the firms. When a particular script is being traded in 2 or more markets, what affects the joint movement of the prices? Is there a lead lag between the markets themselves? I think these are some areas which one can look at. Should investors look at IVX, the Indian Volatility Index, as a trading signal? I think this is something which we can probe in further. How does inclusion or exclusion from the market index affects the liquidity, stock price, or cost of capital for firms? I think they keep on, I think even recently there has been exclusion of some of the scripts and new scripts have been added. I think we can look at this as an area for research and also understand what is the impact of such inclusion or exclusion. Of course, we also can look at how does trading of Indian securities outside the Indian market, India, impact the capital formation in India. And of course, we can also look at in terms of investor profiles, both household investors, mutual fund investors, and understand what their behavior and how they compare it with the risk profile of these type of investors, so that we have a better understanding of how to target the investors in the financial market. So these are some areas which I thought we can look at either for empirical research. There's many more areas, I think as we look in, we can identify them, but I will focus in terms of now further. I think I have highlighted a few more also. I think we can also look at in terms of algo trading, or look at in terms of, do we need to have should there be a single financial regulator for better governance and better operations of the financial market? Or how are the hedge funds in India performing? Are they performing better? I think now, that's also, we have many hedge funds also now. So these are some of the areas which I have to look at for research. But then as a researcher, how do we begin? Okay, there's so many options available, so many things that are happening, and one can choose any topic for their research. But what is the area which I will do research? I think the first most important thing is why we need to identify what is your interest, what is your strength, and maybe you have to, each one of us need to come up with a niche area that we'll try to focus on. I think it's not an easy task, but I think one actually evolves and then identifies what is their strength. Initially, we actually scout around various topics, various areas. Sometimes I do remember when I began my career, I used to do research on every conference that comes in. So the conference theme is what I will work on. But then over a period of time, I think in the last 20 years, I would see that I started focusing on markets related research, financial modeling, and then corporate finance area and governance. So it takes time for one to evolve, but it is important to understand what is it you're doing. Otherwise, we'll be going around in different themes and we won't be growing also. So it is important that you identify and be focused. The more you get focused, you become more thorough in that particular area. You become an expert and become a master in what you're doing. And in the process, you feel very confident to go do some more in-depth, high-quality research in the area. So it's important that you start to identify area and focus on it. I think the goal of every researcher should be to build a profile that qualifies to be an expert in that area. So I think as a faculty, when one begins the career, I think they have another 30 to 40 years. So you should be I think every faculty should be known as an expert in that particular area. I think that's something that should be the goal a researcher should keep in mind. And particularly as many young researchers are coming up now, many of you are planning to do work. I think you can experiment on new areas for the first 5 years, but converge to a few areas after that. So it's always good to know, because you sometimes, as Professor Charles was mentioning, you do something because in the PhD you are asked to do it in some area, but later on when you join the institute, because of funding, you change the areas. But you can keep changing on it, but experiment for 5 years, but then try to converge. I think these are the areas that I'll work on. Otherwise, you'll be going on starting from the scratch. Like our zero-based budgeting, we have to start reading the literature, understanding the theories, right from the scratch whenever you're changing your areas also. So it's important that at least keep a few areas as your own area of interest and keep building on it. Another thing is develop a capability. Research doesn't, I think I've seen that how I have grown over the years. what I was before to what I am is simply because I've been trying to keep learning. You can look at in terms of, see in terms of understanding how to collect data, what are the sources of data, and how to understand and use that, prepare the data for analysis. I think that itself is a very big challenge. A lot of developments in literature is there, a lot of work, a lot of theories are being developed, and read the books, read the papers, research papers in the areas, and develop yourself. And most important thing nowadays is, I think we also need to understand the developments in methodology. Earlier, it's simply enough just to give a descriptive study, but now we need to also do some empirical analysis. But of course, don't get lost into techniques. Techniques are aids for research. Don't think beyond that. I think sometimes nowadays I see researchers focusing more only on the technique rather than on the subject, and they forget the subject matter is concerned. So it's important that use the techniques or tools wherever required, and it's a tool which helps us to find an answer for the problem for which you're doing research. Another thing is also choose an area for research which will help you to build up and say that this is my area in which I'll be known for the next 20, 30 years. Sometimes people say, I choose a problem, I'm looking at what is the effect of crisis. I think a lot of people will now work on impact of COVID, but that cannot be an area for research for 30 years, 40 years. So you look at in terms of some core area in which you can apply COVID or crisis. I think that's the type of research that one should look at so that one can keep on building over a period of time. So how to choose a good topic? I think that's another important thing. Maybe you look at the topic should be such that, particularly when I work and send a paper for the researcher, when papers come in, first thing is you look at in terms of, does it create a curiosity that I'd like to know what it is about? It can be either a familiar topic or a very mature topic where already a lot of work has been done, or too similar to thing, or it can be different also. See, I think we cannot be innovative every time, but at least every research we expect at least some 2 to 3% innovation. That small bit, I think that is what we have to see in terms of what is that small 2 to 3% change that I'm going to bring in through my research. I think that is something which you need to look at. So a few self-check questions that we can ask is the topic, does a topic test, build, or extend a theory? I think that we need to have some clarity on. Are we trying, does the topic add to the previous knowledge, or is it creating something entirely a new direction? Is the topic contribute to theory, or develop a theory, or test the relevance of a theory? I think that also we need to question. Does the topic focus on a unique problem? I think in terms of uniqueness, it may be the problem itself may be unique, or you may come up with a new concept, new way of measuring it, a new technique to solve the problem, or it may be a new application also. So what is this uniqueness? I think that's something which you need to be clear. So I think if we try to answer these questions, we get some more clarity in terms of how our work is going to be different. It's important, it's also relevant that we need to look at, is the research an important area of concern? Will be of interest to the reader, or to the nation, or to society, or to the firms? Is relevant? And most important thing in finance research is availability of data. I think I have seen that many times I want to do several things, but I don't have the data, I cannot do it. Data availability restricts it, but I think now things are changing. Hope this will not be a constraint, but we can try to see in terms of how to get the data required. Another important thing is also keep in mind what is the target journal, what is their expectations, and then also ensure that you have taken care of those things when you are doing your work also. It can be theoretical or it can be empirical, depending on your target journal. And sometimes you can begin with a theoretical paper and then later on move on to an empirical one also. So we can have multiple papers. So just to highlight, I think you can see in the Journal of Financial Markets, and they say that we want high quality original research and applied, and this issues related to securities trading and so we need to look at in terms of what the focus of the journal is. What is that they are expecting? So does my topic fit into the themes that they are looking at? So unless we understand what is the themes on which the journal is looking at, and if it matches, then in that case it makes sense to send it to the journal. Otherwise, it may not be relevant for you to look at that particular journal. So it's not that it is, but nowadays we have, for example, if we look at the qualitative research in journal in financial markets, they say that they look at, the scope is very broad, much more broader than that of the Journal of Financial Markets. As you say, they will look at methodology, they're looking at reforms in banking, behavioral finance, corporate governance, global financial endowment, market timing. So you find that here the scope is much more broader than that of the Journal of Financial Market. So understand when you're looking at targeting a journal, you also understand what is the scope of the topics that they are really interested in. I think that helps us also to position and present our paper for the journal accordingly. So I think I'll just take two things we thought is what are the checklists that we should follow before submitting to a journal. I think you choose an area, you work on it.
If I can request,
I think
Dr. Thenmozhi, if I can request if you could do it a little faster. Because
yeah, I'll be just completing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we look at in terms of, we have to choose the right journal. I think it's very important that the title should be clear. And I think as an editor, most of the editors look at it as three important things: is abstract, introduction, and the conclusion. I think these are the three things that we need to look at. And the most important point I'd like to highlight is we need to have clarity in the storyline. Unless and until we have clarity in terms of what is the story that we are looking at, then we cannot sell our paper to the editor also. So maybe you're not to look at it. Of course, please, one needs to follow the journal the guidelines. It's always good to present the paper in the conferences and keep revising and rewriting it. Get the peer review so that you can improve the paper. And most important thing is do proofreading, check references, check for language, and for plagiarism, try to ensure that it is very minimum. I think these things will help us to ensure that you don't go for a desk rejection. I think that's very important. And if you look at the common reasons for rejection, I think one is people look for originality, the rationale is not clear, or there is something that's the research question is not clear, measurement is not appropriate, or we have not linked it to the recent papers. Or basically people look at there's lack of completeness, clarity, or credibility. I think if you understand why journals reject, I think it helps you to position your paper. So the last thing that I would like to say is what are the uniqueness of a high quality paper is we need to ensure that the paper is it's a simple paper, precise and clear in positioning what they are applying to. I think the reader should understand, okay, this is what the researcher has done, and this is the methodology, and this is the finding. That should be very clear. I think if we can convince the reader to understand this, I think definitely it will go into any high quality journal. More than clarity is required in the way in which you are presenting it. And most important thing is there must be depth in the way in which you've done the analysis, and also validate the work, and also bring out the implications here again. And of course, it's many people want to publish very quickly. I think if you want a good quality paper, it doesn't happen quickly. It takes time. One needs a lot of patience. I think as Professor Agarwal and as well as Charles were saying, we need patience. Keep smiling because it doesn't go faster. And then I'm sure that definitely each one of you will be able to publish in high quality journals. So I'd like to conclude here saying that research is a journey. And I always feel that doing research is a joy. I think you should enjoy what you're doing and develop a research expertise in a specific area of your own interest. Explore, experiment, and enjoy doing high quality research. I think this is what is my best thing I'd like to say now.
Thank you, Dr. Thenmozhi, for that beautiful presentation and insight on what you wanted to say about the empirical and theoretical. And the chart which you showed in the second slide, we will work on the other two components, which is the analytical and the policy one, in the next webinar. In fact, we will now be moving to our next speaker. I could not have her VT on the web, but then I thought I should bring up our university. And I also wanted to show one more thing which was there. I thought it would be good if I can show that to everybody, because Dr. Thenmozhi did mention about it, and that was that, you have, just a second. The other thing which I wanted to show as well was what we have been able to do, and which was important because Dr. Thenmozhi mentioned about it, that it's important that, we have been adopting the Western theories and implementing it in empirical work. But I thought this came to my mind and I wanted to share this with everyone. Our chief editor and chairman's name appeared in this list, which was released in 2004 by an economist, Aaron Morris, somewhere in central US, which actually enlisted how many people are there who are expected to get the Nobel Prize in 2004. As you can see, this is October 2004, that was 17-18 October. And actually, if you really look at this list, which was released by the gentleman who forecasted, he had brought in the names of Helen Soto, Gordon Truck, Robert Barrow, Partha Dasgupta, Eugene Farmer, Edward Prescott, who got the Nobel Prize in 2004, then Professor Agarwal for Finance and Development, Celeste Freddoso, and Paul Pubmed. 4 of these people have actually got the Nobel Prize since 2004, and that's what makes this list, which came out, in fact, after the Nobel Prize was announced in that particular year. This list actually went off the line, and this was released almost about a month and a half, 2 months before. This is Aaron Lane Morris, a scholar there in central US, who actually did this. So I thought I should share, because what Dr. Thenmozhi said about that we are now creating theories and all, it's not only that we have to get out from the West or the Western management systems and principles, we have to work on it. Each country has its own zone or own function. And I thought I should share this brief introduction, about what we have been able to achieve sitting here, and Professor Agarwal has been, acknowledged for his work. We are going to now have with us speak on the topic of how to research, the Vice President of this university, called the Dr. Seotomo University, Indonesia. And I thought, since I could not have a CV up on this because it's not in English, so I thought maybe I requested that next time we can have an English CV on the web as well, of the website. But then this is where she represents. This is there in English, but I could not somehow find it. Maybe my fault not being able to find. And now we will move to her in just a minute to listen to her address on how to research. As you know, she's not only a researcher, but heading as an administrative head also of the university. So she is on the funding part of the research and the doing part of the research as well. So she has both balls in her hands, and it's a question of how does she go about juggling these balls and presenting it. And thank you for putting up that beautiful background. I need to learn this technological glitch from you of putting it on the background, which I could not do so far, but I would love to learn it from you, how to go about doing it. It looks beautiful. Thank you. Meithiana, please go ahead with your address.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Aman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, the honorable all speaker, all committee, and all the audience. Thank you for the opportunity that gave to me to speak theoretical and empirical research. I would like to introduce again of myself. I am Dr. Meithiana. I know it is rather difficult to pronounce, so for easy, you can call me Dr. May. I'm from Dr. Seotomo University, Surabaya, one of private higher education in East Java. And right now, for your information, in Indonesia is quiet night, so thank you for Indonesian participant. I know it's your sleep time. I hope it will be useful and to develop our career and persona. I will deliver short description on speech without PPT, without PowerPoint, because I'm so appreciate the presentation before. It's perfect and complete information about the topic. And now, what is theoretical research? Theories are formulated to explain, predict, and understand phenomena, and in many cases, to challenge and extend existing knowledge within the limits of the critical bounding assumption. The theoretical framework is the structure that can hold or support a theory of a research study. The theoretical framework introduces and describes the theory which explains why the research problem under study exists. A theoretical framework consists of concepts together with their definition and existing theory that are used for particular study. The theoretical framework must demonstrate an understanding of theories and concepts that are relevant to the topic of your research paper and that will relate it to broader fields of knowledge in class you are taking. And also, it's not something that is found readily available in the literature. You must review course, reading, and reading research literature for theories and analytic model that are relevant to the research problem you are investigating. The selection of the theory should depend on its appropriateness, ease of application, and explanatory power. Theoretical framework strengthens the study in the following ways. An explicit statement: the theoretical framework connects the researcher to existing knowledge. Articulating the theoretical assumption of a research study forces you to address questions of why and how. Having a theory helps you to identify the limit to those generalizations. By virtue of its application nature, good theory is in the social science is of value precisely because it fulfills one primary purpose: to explain the meaning, nature, and challenge of a phenomenon often experienced but explained in the world in which we live, so that we may use that knowledge and understanding to act in more informed and effective ways. Some strategies to develop of an effective theoretical research. The first, examine your thesis title and research problem, and then brainstorm on what you consider to be the key variable in your research, and then review related literature, list the construct and variable, review the key social science theory, and discuss the assumption for proposition. A theoretical research is used to limit the scope of the relevant data by focusing on specific variable and defining the specific viewpoint framework that the researcher will take in analyzing and interpreting the data to be gathered, understanding concept and variable according to the given definition, and building knowledge by validating or challenging theoretical assumption. And think of theories are conceptual basis for understanding, analyzing, and designing ways to investigate relationship within social science. To the end, the following roles served by a theory can help guide the development of your framework, means by which new research data can be interpreted and code for the future use, and respond to the new problem that have no previously identified solution strategy. And what is empirical research? Empirical research is a type of research methodology that makes use of variable evidence in order to arrive at research outcome. In other words, this type of research relies solely on evidence obtained through observation or scientific data collection method. Empirical can be carried out using qualitative or quantitative observation method, depending on the data sample that is quantifiable data or non-numerical data. Unlike theoretical research that depends on personified notion about the research variable, empirical research also carries a scientific investigation to measure the experimental probability of the research variable. Characteristic of empirical research is research question. An empirical research begins with a set of research questions that guide the investigation. In many cases, these research questions constitute the research hypothesis, which is tested using qualitative and quantitative methods as dictated by the nature of the research. And then definition of the research variable. The research variables are clearly defined in terms of their population, type, characteristic, and behavior. In other words, the data sample is clearly delimited and placed within the context of the research. Description of the research methodology And then outline an empirical research is usually defined into 4 parts.
Just a second. Just a second. Someone who has unmuted himself, requested to kindly. Yes, just a second.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I continue with characteristic of empirical research after research question, and then definition of research variable, description of research methodology, and then outline. An empirical research is usually defined into 4 parts, which are the introduction, methodology, finding, and discussion. The introduction provides a background of the empirical study, while the methodology describes the research design process and tools for the systematic investigation. The findings refer to the research outcome, and they can be outlined as statistical data or in the form of information obtained through the qualitative observation of research variable. The discussion highlights the significance of study and its contribution to knowledge. Some studies use of empirical research in law, empirical research in medicine, and also empirical research in anthropology. And the empirical research cycle, there are five phase cycle that outline the systematic process for conducting an empirical research. It was developed by Dutch psychologists. There are observation, and then introduction, deduction, testing, and evaluation. For example, of empirical research, an empirical research study can be carried out to determine if listening to happy music improves the mood of individual. The researcher may need conduct an experiment that involves exposing individual to happy music to see if this is improve their mood. The finding from such an experiment will provide empirical evidence that confirm or refute the hypothesis. An empirical research study can also be carried out to determine the effect of a new drug on specific group of the people. Researcher may expose the research subject to control quantities of drug and observe research subject and control. And so many example for empirical research. And how is empirical research data collection method? We can gather data in empirical research by survey or questionnaire. A survey is a method.
Meithiana,
Yes?
if I can request you to kindly complete it in another 1 minute or so.
Okay, thank you. A survey is a method of data gathering that is typically employed by researchers to gather a large set of data from specific number of respondents. And then experiment, also we can use a case study method, observation, method of qualitative data gather that requires researchers to study the behavior of research variable in their natural environment. Okay, I think we can compare between empirical and non-empirical research by the definition, method, data sample, data collection method, and also the advantage, disadvantage, and the conclusion. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meithiana, for that beautiful presentation. And now I would be moving to my next speaker, who is Bhaskar, a person I'm seeing after almost 25 or maybe 28 years. It's good to see you, Bhaskar. Although we've been connected through various social media platforms, we've connected and spoken so many times, but I've not seen his face in person for good 25, I would say almost 30 years now. We studied together as children in school, so it's been a long time. But just to introduce Bhaskar, I've been hearing and reading about his awards, his scientific discoveries, his contributions, and I'm very happy that he accepted my invitation, knowing very well that it's not a medical conference. But then many times people ask me that you're an institute of finance, and why do you want me as a medical? I had the CSIR head, who was also a medical professor. He said, most of you are finance and economics guys who are speaking. Why do you want me in? Fortunately, Bhaskar did not ask me this question. When he understood the topic, that it is research and it is irrespective of which field it comes from. I am going to bring actually psychologists and other people from different walks of life, even environmentalists who do research and all, so that they can be a different perspective of how people do research in different fields. And that's how I thought, why don't we have Bhaskar here? Bhaskar, as you can see, is a urologist, is working with the University Hospital Southampton, NHS, Foundation Trust Hospital, which is the largest health services in the United Kingdom. He is a training and educator. He's a professor of Indologist and UHS since 2012. He has led a urologist UHS and performed more than 1,500 uroscopy procedures, surgeries, and treated kidney stones. His outcome shows a stone-free rate of 96% and a minor complication rate of 4%. And nearly 80% of patients have been able to go home to the same day as their surgery. Although everyone has developed a lot of appreciation for doctors in the last 3 months, but it's always been there. I think the charm in India and in Indian families in particular, I can't say for the rest of the world, has been that they would like, if they have 2 children, one to be an engineer or a government officer and the other to be a doctor. And that's been a dream for almost all families across, whether you're a rich family or a poor. And I know in the United States, the dream is to have one child as a lawyer and another as a doctor. And I have a professor who's working at the SUNY in New York, and also at the Wharton School in Pennsylvania, dual position holder. And he has 2 sons. He's Israeli, and one of them is a lawyer and one of them is a doctor. So he's been able to achieve that dream of the US and Israelis have, but in India it's more engineer and doctor. And the preciseness which doctors can have, you can see at times go very non-precise in economics, but here they have very precise. In any case, he is, as he told me, not only a winner, but he is president of various associations of the urology and on urology. He's elected member of the BOC Executive Academic Conference Committee. He's a NICE specialist advisor. He's a coordinator of a large number of simulation on training programs and European Urology Resident Education Program. He's a winner of the Clinical Research Award of the EAU sections of that is in 2019. He's winner of the Best Paper of Literature Award 2017, joint winner of NHS Emerging Leader Award and the finalist of NHS Award in the Royal Society of Medicine, which is the apex body, if I understand correctly, because I know I've been a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences for a long time. I've been a co-chairman of their conference for almost 20 years now, based out of St. Petersburg. So I know how the heads of the Academies of Sciences in various countries function, which are the apex bodies. It's published over 250 peer-reviewed journals, and this is where I envy, because I have roughly maybe about 68 or 70 papers, Bhaskar, and you have topped the world. 250 papers. A lot of people do it. But it's okay. I'm happy with what I have a little bit, but I'm happy that our papers have made economic impact. Whether it is the Money Laundering Act, whether it is the budget time change, whether it is education cess, whether it is Kisan credit card, whether it is KYC norms adopted worldwide. So almost about 40 such decisions worldwide have been based on our research works. So that gives me fairly good amount of pride, and some of the recent works on national labor exchange and others are making an impact. But I'm very happy to see this thing, because I know Bhaskar, but I didn't know some of these finer intricacies of Bhaskar till I read his CV before to introduce. So I thought I should better put it up on the screen instead of doing so. He is on the editorial board of 6 journals and reviewer for 15 journals, including British, American, and European journals. And a beginning prostate hypertrophy, Professor Amir published extensively 13 papers on minimally invasive procedures and kidney stones. You can see. So I'll leave that to now. You can judge from his presentation. I think I hope he'll keep it simple and not show some of the scary operation tasks which he does, and maybe doing it in research conferences which he does for medical screening. But then I thought he must be there to give that impact on the medical research and the research in a general form. I know it is not empirical, it's more clinical, as is being talked about lately with even Corona. But then I said, let's keep the topic still empirical, and then he can mix the two words around. Bhaskar, all to you now.
Thank you very much, Aman. Can you see the screen and can you hear me okay? Okay.
See the screen and hear your beautiful voice.
Perfect. Thank you. So when Aman invited me, as Aman, why me? Are you sure? But then knowing Aman, I knew he wouldn't take no for an answer. So I was stuck, what do I do? What can I tell people in finance? I have no, apart from being a Marwari, I have no other financial credentials really. So I thought, okay, but Aman has invited me. I can't say no to him. We do go back a long time. And I'm going to share with you some of the medical side of empirical and theoretical research. Now, it may or may not be, finance-based at all, but it will give you a flavor of what medical or surgical research is all about. Thank you very much, IIF. It has been an amazing opportunity. My dad is a chartered accountant. He qualified a long time ago in India, and he was very excited. I'm like, Dad, I don't even know what I'm going to do. They might bar me forever. So with that in mind, I'm going to start my presentation. Thank you so much. These are some of my affiliations. Apart from the European School and European Association, I'm president of Petra and ITRU groups. Theoretical research, I mean, in world of medicine, everything has to start from somewhere. And if you don't have a theory behind it, how can you then transform it into clinical work, or how can you make progress? So theoretical research, as I would put it, is exploration of systems of beliefs and assumptions. It is hypothetical, but it is related to ideas and concepts. And it is the beginning from which everything would start, because you need to have an idea, you need to have a concept that you need to work on. And that means, it is based on theory and conceptual and theoretical framework, and you collect data and then you use this for a practical framework. So empirical research, on the other hand, is based on a variety of things: induction, deduction, testing, evaluation, observation. And a lot of it is related to clinical research. And the word empirikos comes from the Greek word, which means experienced, which means I will not believe it unless I see it. And doctors are typical examples of that. You will not find a doctor. I mean, I used to believe in lots of things when I grew up in India in a village. But now, if you ask me, tell me something, I will not believe it, because now I have become a man of science. And it might be right or wrong, but that is how it is. We all believe in empirical research. So going forward, it is either direct or indirect evidence of observation. It needs to be observed. It could be quantitative or numerical, or it could be qualitative, example, focus group, experiments, or interviews. It is based on observed or measured phenomena, and it develops knowledge from real experience. So, there has to be real experience for this, either in terms of its usage or in terms of how it's developed. This is just a brief of how medical research works. So if you look at the primary research and secondary research, that's how we divide medical research. The primary research starts with basic research, or it could be clinical research, epidemiological research, or review type things, systematic reviews or meta-analysis. Now, most of it, as you would see, is based on not theoretical, but empirical research, except this area. This is the only theoretical research that we have, where you have development methodology or analytical areas like artificial intelligence and so on. Rest, everything is probably applied or clinical research, or I would say empirical research. Now, going forward, it could be applied research, experimental or clinical study, observational, experimental, intervention. But remember, all of it has a patient at the end of it. And hence, unlike any other branch, in medical branch, you have got a patient and they may come to harm if you're not careful. And hence, this is very important to realize that. Now, we have all got to work in a framework, use clinical guidelines, but how are they formed? On the one hand, on the bottom of the pyramid, you start off with lab and animal studies. Then you publish some case reports. You go into cohort studies and control studies. Then you have randomized control trial. 2 groups of patients. One you give the drug, one you don't, and see the effect. but then you pool them together and you analyze them as a whole, do meta-analysis, and that gives you the guideline which we work on. So it is a different way of thinking when we look at the clinical guidelines and how they are made. Of course, evidence-based medicine that doesn't just require scientific evidence. That is just one part of jigsaw. There's clinical judgment, because the same patient, you might think, well, actually, this medication is too expensive. I might need to give. So clinical judgment comes into play. Similarly, patients' values and preferences, it is not just about evidence and clinical judgment. What does the patient actually want? They might have a lot of trouble buying a catheter, which is used to drain the bladder in the village. We have all, heard of Padman, the famous Akshay Kumar movie, which was based on, tampons and pads. And the patient's values are very important. You can make all these things, but if they can't afford it, they're not going to buy it. Same thing in evidence-based medicine. And you have to juggle as a doctor in between all these three areas. And of course, it's a cycle. You ask the question, you acquire the data, appraise the data, apply it, and then you audit the results, audit the outcomes. So first there is a question, you build evidence, then you appraise. Is it good, bad? How is it? You apply it to real world, and then you audit your data. Is it good? And then the cycle repeats again. If your outcomes are not good, improve on it by auditing it, and then do it all over again till you've got it right. This is what patient-centered medicine is all about. Now, going forward, decision-making is a bit more complex. You have to look at environment and organizational context. What is the best research? And then you have to feed that population characteristics. But remember, if you didn't have the money to provide that, no matter what you can do, I'll give you an example. I was in Lucknow 10 years ago in a short fellowship, and normally we would have done an endoscopic procedure. That particular patient, despite the aid from the government, couldn't afford it, and he needed an open surgery. Equally good results, but you have to think of resources. Are the resources going to support the rest of it? So this is a little bit more difficult in the decision making when it comes to medical research. A typical example, I would say, is COVID vaccine. We have all been affected with COVID pandemic. Let's think about COVID vaccine. So at the moment, it is just theoretical. How does vaccine, how will it work? Well, we will take a gene, put it into a virus, and then inject it back to the patient as a vaccine. And how will that work? Well, the vaccine will then trigger chain reaction within our cells to fight the virus. That is conceptual. We don't have a vaccine yet, but perhaps we will get a vaccine. But this concept has led to the theory behind, and which will lead to clinical activity. And once the vaccine is made, we can then try it. But it starts from theory and then goes on to conceptualization and then finally testing. So the theoretical research has been done. One of the areas in urology is artificial intelligence. That starts from lots of different theories, and how is it going to work, and which algorithm you'll apply, and so on. And in urology, based on this, we have looked at the areas where we have done it is various cancer work, or some endourology or kidney stone work, or prostate cancer specifically, looking at pathology and so on. So the theoretical knowledge can be used, but it may not be in all aspects of medicine. But in some aspects of medicine, it is possible to use it. Now, looking at other areas where we have managed to do this theory to practical, vaccines. So in urinary infections, same concept came, but now we have proven, and we have looked at how vaccines can be used. Similarly, for practical purposes, laser was born in the lab, but now we are treating pediatric stones, kids' stones, using a high-powered laser. So theory to practical. Tap water, we all use tap or bottled water, but then this is a typical example of how you think they will form stones, but does it really? And then looking at the evidence behind and looking at whether it's going to affect. So these are all examples, but by and large, you will see that most of our work is actually patient-centered, because just theory on its own is not going to work. You will need to have evidence behind, because remember, whatever we do, we can affect somebody's life, in a good manner or in a really bad manner if they get side effects or complications. So just changing subjects, in academic measures in medicine and surgery, there are certain metrics. I'm sure there are certain metrics in all fields, including field of finance. But in our area, citation index count for a lot. H index, the RG score. I don't know if ResearchGate is used very widely. I mean, now it is commonly used in urology and surgical branches. So what is your ResearchGate score? H index is basically how many papers are published, that number of times. Whether you have grant income, are you first or senior author, what is the impact factor, how much collaboration you have, networking across Europe, across the world, and finally, what prizes have you won? These are all different aspects of academic metrics. So how does it work? What do we need? The longer you are in academia, the better the scores are. So if you're 30 and you've published a lot, by the time you're 60, you're probably one of the father figures in that area. Because usually that happens as you age. You must have a good index, and that usually happens after you're 55, if you're lucky after you're 50. So that is something that happens with time, as people know about your research, cite your research, and so on. And that they reflect the impact factors, citations, reads, best paper, and so on. So all these together get a matrix score that people use. And some topics, of course, are more popular. So if, for example, if the prostate cancer, that is the most, let's say, the researched area in urology, and if you happen to be somebody who does a lot of research in prostate cancer, of course, you'll be more popular, or your research will be more popular than some of the other areas. This is my ResearchGate score, so I would consider it to be, it's good. And again, what is it based on? Research items, so published papers, citations, reads, all that make up a ResearchGate score. And similarly, we use something called, Google citations. So how many papers have been cited? I10, 10 times or more. H index is 40 times, 40 papers have been cited, and so on. And luckily, I'm 44. Me and Aman probably are same age. So there's a lot of time to catch up. So in time, hopefully, this will get better. So the sooner you start and the better the metrics are, it'll keep improving over time. And then we have something called Pubmed. Pubmed is like your medical, library. If you put your name, all your research, generally, I would say 80 to 90% of good journals will be indexed here, and they will all come. And year on year, you can see how your citation index grows. And this is mine, and I've been very busy over the last 3-4 years. I don't want to be so busy, but sometimes, your own success chases you. And then you are in this, I'm enjoying it though, but it is not always nice to be so busy, but it's good. And this is all areas of urology. It's education, it is primary prevention of diseases, it's secondary prevention, and so on. One of the things that we say often is publish or perish. Does everyone needs to do it for becoming a good doctor? I don't think so. You don't need to publish to be a good doctor. The good doctor is something that you learn, either you have that virtue already, or you look at your trainers and you learn by treating patients and getting that satisfaction and a thank you from them. But you should be able to critically appraise the paper. If you can't do that, then I don't think you can be up to date with the most latest research, because you should be able to do that. Career progression, unfortunately, sometimes is linked, not always, and hence people do try and publish. Quality is more important than quantity. So among all those things you said to me about your research, I'm sure it's all quality. Mine may not be. So I think mine is as well. But all I'm saying is, quantity is not the most important thing. Quality is.
I want to intervene. I don't want to discount you here. It's just that, it is a good motivating factor. Many of my colleagues across the globe have so many numbers. But, it's never been a number game for me. Each one of my paper actually takes about sometimes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to finally come out. And then after I've written it, actually, I take about 2 to 3 years sending it across to people for their peer reviews across the globe. And then it takes about 2 to 3 years also before I actually get it published. And so, a paper I'm still working on, you'll be surprised, it's been 20 years I've been working on the paper. I've discussed with 4 Nobel laureates, but I've still not concreted on what I want to say. So this is what it goes on. So I agree with you, but then I feel motivated by your number.
No, I think it's not in the numbers. And I have to say, I've been fortunate, a lot of things I've worked on have come around, it doesn't always happen, but for me, it's happened. But it is quality rather than quantity. I'd rather have 5 really good papers, but, sometimes it's also, you've got lots of junior trainees, lots of junior doctors who want to do this. Their career progression is linked and you try to help them. So, but I agree, it's quality rather than quantity. And networking collaboration is a key. I think this is fundamental. If you want to do good research, as Aman says, you have to network and collaborate. You can't do it in isolation. And you have to be focused rather than broad-based. Scattergun approach doesn't help. This is the niche. This is where I'm good at. This is where I focus. Because you can't be good at everything, I think. And that for me includes Indian cooking. I'm not good at it. I'm just good at 1 or 2 things that I'm good at making. But if you're good at it, that's fine. That will do the job. As a surgeon, it's also important to have outcome research and how our own outcomes are. So if I do this type of surgery, what is my outcome? What is the benchmark against national standards? Are my patients suffering more? And if they are, do I need to change my technique? You have to follow the guidelines. Of course, you have to individualize it to the patient, but you have to follow the guidelines. It should be unbiased. And then you publish research based on individualized patient care. The world of academia, you sometimes need to push and sometimes you need to pull people. But remember, it is easy to be critical. It is more difficult than most people appreciate. Doing it together and being supportive is the key. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskar, for that insight, and please do stay with us. I hope there is no medical emergency going on where you have to rush, and I just hope that you stay back because we have only 2 more speakers with us before we open the house for questions. There would be a delay of about 20 minutes, so we will end by 8:20, 8:25. But now I'll go to Professor Yamini Agarwal just to introduce her briefly. Yamini, as I said, is currently the director of the IIF Business School, which is a sister institution of the Indian Institute of Finance. But she is there with us. She's a Dean Research with the Indian Institute of Finance. Just to go to her, this is just in brief, although it runs, let me just see if I can open up. No, it's not working here. Yes. Yamini is a professor currently also with the Finance. She's done a PhD from IIT Delhi and Masters from Commerce from Delhi School of Economics. She is done her MBA also from the Indian Institute of Finance and Bachelor's from the Shriram College of Commerce. She's been a rank holder all through. She has also been nominated to do a special program from Sweden. She appears on Lok Sabha TV, DD Doordarshan, Rajya Sabha TV, CNBC, ABP, top of the channel. Uzbek. Almost every day, every week, for at least once or twice, she's on All India Radio, which goes across the country. Her teaching experience is over 18 years now, is in the area of corporate finance, advanced financial analysis, international finance, new financial models, managerial economics, e-finance, and her current research interests are in corporate finance, financial modeling, and public finance. Her research indicates theories and techniques of capital structure, decision based on postulate of single objective, giving erroneous and irrational results, and have been outdated in the present era. She has developed goal programming models for capital structure decision under multiple objectives of businesses. Her research works have been published widely. Some of them have been in Journal of Accounting, Auditing, and Finance, which is considered to be among the top 2-3 journals around the world in the area of finance and accounting. Finance India, Indian Economic Journal, the International Journal of Innovative Managerial, Indirect Production in Japan, Economic Translation Community in Romania, and Managerial Economics and Finance in EMEFR, France, Lahore Journal of Economics in Pakistan, and various other journals across the globe, which is there. Professor Agarwal has chaired over 16 conferences and seminars, and she has supervised over 71 MBA dissertations. She has been on editorial board of various journals and on the member of the Bureau of Indian Standards, which is the apex body like the ISO in the world. We have BIS, which gives out the standards. She's also been a board member of the Indo-American Chamber. She's authored 2 books, one by the Capital Structure Decision Evaluating Risk and Uncertainty by John Wiley and Sons, by both US, UK, and Singapore, and the other one on Capital Structure Decision and Multiple Objectives by the IIF Publications. She has held these positions in the past. She is a regular invitee to the Asian Development Bank Board of Governors meeting and OECD meetings and World Bank meetings. She has addressed various universities, central banks, and has addressed over 200 national seminars and international conferences and visited over 20 countries. Just to give you a glimpse of, this is one of the books which she has published, and the other one which is published by the Indian Institute of Finance is this. I will now go to Yamini for her address. I would request if she can keep it within a span of 10 to 15 minutes so that we can finish it by 8:20 today, because we have Shantanu to address after you and Saurabh as well. So if you can keep it around 10 minutes, please. Thank you. Sorry for curtailing your time.
Thank you, Professor Raman Agarwal, for giving me an opportunity to speak at a prestigious forum which has the leaders in research and their respective fields speaking to the participants. Well, I think a lot has been said by all the leaders with respect to what is theoretical research and what is empirical research. When we look at the perspectives which have been given to us by all the previous speakers, I would like to add on as to what they have been speaking and what I can possibly look at from my experience into theoretical and empirical research. So when we did start, we had the opening address by Professor J.D. Agarwal, where he did say that you look in for a right mentor or a supervisor who's there, looking for a right university that is there, prepare a bibliography, refer to PhD works, refer to right libraries, prepare your entire arrangements before you begin to bring about research. So when we talk about theoretical research or the frameworks that are there, which is accepted in a journalized frame, to explain a particular phenomena and indicate a relationship between variables that are there, it is a part of the theoretical framework which exists. Now, theoretical frameworks are constructs or concepts, as has been outlined by Professor Meithiana as well as the others, which indicates that when we talk about a theoretical framework, it is giving us an idea about what is the basic concept behind a particular phenomena. How do things correlate with each other? How do things work with each other? What works and what does not work in a conceptual framework? When one actually tries to collect data and tries to research and observe this data and try to come at about estimates or develop concepts or constructs by validating it using the data, we usually refer to it as empirical research. Now, none of the two researches by themselves is less important because one frames the basis of the other. And when we talk about the basis, it is important to understand that if you begin with an empirical research, it is necessary to have a theory behind it. Similarly, empirical researches in various fields, let's say security analysis or finance or many other fields, or even medical sciences, has been the basis of developing theories which have been true and have created universal laws. So when we talk about theoretical research and empirical research, it is necessary that one builds on the constructs by understanding the literature which has been there. As Professor J.D. Agarwal did say, that you prepare a bibliography, try to see what the different scholars have actually worked on. How do you prepare that particular bibliography according to your interest will decide as to what you're reading, how you're interpreting, and other factors. Professor Charles also said that when you are trying to actually look at a topic, it needs to be attractive, it needs to be spotting the trends, it needs to look at uncharted grounds, which are important factors. Also, knowing your strengths with respect to qualitative and quantitative factors is an important aspect, whereby you understand that you can actually develop, whether you're doing a theoretical work or you're doing an empirical work, you can develop it with a better cooperation, with building teams, with different scholars, with different researchers, with your supervisor, with your mentors, and other people who probably might have researched in that particular area. Now, building a quantitative skill usually comes more easily in terms of knowing mathematical developments, knowing statistics well, charting into econometrics and advanced studies that are there. Also, when you go into doing social science research, one may understand how social science research works in terms of identifying what quality of data you need to collect, how do you need to collect it. Let's say, do you need to specifically move on to focus groups? Do you need to work on semi-structured interviews, or would questionnaires be sufficient, and so forth. So when you're looking in for quantitative data for your empirical research, you need to work with different fields together to understand, estimate, collect data, analyze it, as well as present it. When we talk about theoretical frameworks also, we do see that different constructs built by different people are pulled together to begin with a theoretical framework which we want to develop. Now, again, when we talk about these theoretical frameworks or empirical works, what is important to understand is that we need to specifically identify what phenomena we are wanting to study. So like Professor Thenmozhi said, develop your questions. What kind of research are you doing? Understand your type of research, which basically means, are you going to go in for empirical research? Are you going in for applied research? Are you going in for, sorry, are you going in for policy-oriented research? What kind of a research are you wanting to do? Understand and develop your questions, develop your research objective, develop your hypothesis, and then go in for testing your hypothesis or building your hypothesis through theoretical frameworks or empirical works. Again, when we actually talk about all these particular aspects and try to understand which particular variable is of our interest, we try to see which particular other variables affect it. So we need to understand theory as well as what in empirical works has it been provided for the different variables affecting a particular variable. And then we need to estimate the method that we measure these particular variables. Now, a lot of people have a lot of ideas which may be extremely lightning or which may be very important workings in the world do in terms of finance or other activities, but it is not necessary that everything gets estimated through empirical works or theoretical works, because estimation or measurement is very important. Let's say, for example, we all know that a vaccine for COVID-19 is needed. But how do we develop it? Which particular factors will affect it? Which factors do not affect it? For that, understanding what are the symptoms and how they can be addressed needs to be identified. So one, understanding which particular variable are you trying to understand the variations from, and which particular variables affect it would make a difference. So define your core variables, define your peripheral variables, understand the peripheral variables may not be taken as control variables while you're doing empirical research. Even in the theoretical research, the peripheral variables may be something which might opt out for a scope, for further scope for research, but may be acting as a limitation at the moment. Again, it becomes easier for a researcher to actually research something when he has strong backgrounds available to it, which basically means that if you know somebody has already tested with something at a particular stage to understand the phenomena, if you repeat the particular test in different time zones, in different markets, or in different manner, you may be able to understand whether the particular theory exists in the particular framework or it does not exist in the framework, which adds on to your empirical work. Again, when developing or when working on theoretical works or when working on empirical works, it's always good to take feedback. So feedback on what kind of a sample size you should choose, especially for the empirical work, how the sample can be considered as relevant. Let's say, for example, do you need to do a Bartlett's test, do you need to do a Grunbank test, or you need to do any other particular test which defines the particular variable, which particular lags or how much lags do you need to opt for, do you use AIC, do you use SIC, what kind of a particular measure do you use to choose whether the particular lags are correct in the variables, which particular model do you use, and so forth. Also, it's important to understand that when you're developing frameworks, whether it is theoretical or whether you're doing empirical works, the review of the work becomes important. So, which has been outlined by Charles, Thenmozhi, and Mitali, as well as Professor Bhaskar, which is that you need to get the right feedbacks, which is definitely invariably are reflected in the manner in which your papers are cited, in which the manner in your H indexes exist, or your RGA scores exist, or your publications are accepted, and so forth. Also, you can also go in for peer reviews, which are there. Now, again, what is very important over here is that when you actually bring about an empirical research or a theoretical research, when we understand the constructs or when we understand the variable interactions, just running a model may not be helpful, or just getting a data may not be helpful. Assessing the data and the validity of the data would be also equally important. Let's say, how do you handle the missing values? how have you handled the extreme values? Let's say, for example, you're doing it in the stock markets, you take a particular sample where there are certain periods of crashes. How did you handle those particular specific periods? Did you remove them? Did you induct them? Did you smoothen the particular data at that particular point of time? How did you opt for it? Are you trying to understand cycles? Are you trying to understand seasonalities? What are you trying to do with the particular data becomes essential in creating the validity of your research. So when you're wanting to publish it with the journals, it becomes important. What have you done with data? Let's say today there is a question which is being raised on coronal, that did the sufficient amount of clinical trials really take place to understand whether this medicine is effective or not becomes questionable. Is it there or is it not there? So again, the validity of your particular research or your outcomes in terms of generalizations will only become important if they follow the basic rules of the right sample, right data, proper time frameworks, proper measurements, as well as the right research methodology that is there. And that is what many of the journals do look at. I think Professor Charles also said that when you are actually wanting to look at theoretical or empirical works, you must also look in for getting grants, getting yourself funded, promoting yourself through the networks, attending workshops and other factors. Professor Thenmozhi also said that when you're looking at beginning your research area, or even Professor Bhaskar said, when you're beginning to work with something, as in when you add value to your research work, you would promote yourself. So which becomes important, that what kind of an area specialization you're looking at, whether you want to specialize in the theoretical areas or you want to specialize in the empirical areas. Both have their own set of relevance, both have their set of importance which is there. Though we've seen a lot of journals tend to focus more on empirical works because data becomes an important source. In finance, a lot of research can be seen in certain specific areas where there is data which is more easily available. Let's say there are CMI Proves, which is there, Capital Market Online, that is there, BSC, NSE, many other stock exchanges that are there, which give you readily information on stock prices, on other information sets on the corporates, which you might actually require. Similarly, any particular science you're wanting to opt for, data becomes an important factor. Again, let's say the blockchain technology, which you heard, you've seen there has been a paper which is anonymously written. Nobody knows how the Bitcoins have been created, but there is a paper which is there. So that was a theoretical framework. So theoretical frameworks do lead to empirical works when you test for them. So again, I believe the previous speakers have given a strong emphasis on when you bring about a research, it should also be something that should be acceptable in the research group that is there. And to bring about the acceptability, it's not necessary you toe the line of what the researchers say, but you need to have the right logical constructs which are there with the right set of samples, with the right set of measurements, with the right set of models, the right set of outcomes and the results which are presented. Again, what is very important when you do theoretical framework or let's say an empirical work, like Professor Thenmozhi or Professor Bhaskar did represent a very beautiful PPT in terms of the presentations which were done. His presentation makes an important deal in terms of what you're presenting. So lay down your research objectives clearly, lay down your data sample size, which is there specifically, lay down your model which you're using in the right framework. Don't push too much data into the particular paper which is there. You can use it in the end. Define the results and their interpretations appropriately for the particular journal or the editors to understand. As an associate editor of Finance India for last so many years, I have seen a lot of people try to just bring in more data in place and say that this is an empirical work. Empirical work in terms of its relevance is more important. So again, what is important is as you study econometrics or you study anything, they will always say theoretical frameworks become the basis of the empirical works. Also, the empirical works of the data, what you observe and how you observe and what results you get, then can be journalized through the induction process or the deduction process of research, can become the basis for the theoretical framework. So both the frameworks work together and in line with each other. So these are a few points which I think were relevant, and a lot of good aspects have been highlighted by most of the speakers who were speaking before me. And I thank again Indian Institute of Finance as well as all the other speakers for giving and enlightening us with this particular aspect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yamini, for that insight and actually even briefing it up. I'll go to Shantanu, and there's so much to speak about Shantanu. But one thing which I can tell about Shantanu is that, since I could not connect with Bala and then Fred, then I requested Shantanu early in the morning. And he was, yes. That is something which is a blessing. Bhaskar, let me tell you, this is something which I've got as a blessing in the last 20 years, that whenever I speak to my friends and colleagues from across the globe, none of them in the last 2 months have ever said no. Maybe they're tied up or they're not well or something, they will say, I'll do it next week or something. But they have not said no exactly the way you said. And that is something which my real earning is, in a matter of fact. That is something which I feel proud of. And Shantanu came, I thought, this one here with the LinkedIn gives a very good insight on what Shantanu is and what he does. He's a catalyzing multimodal transporter guy. He does shipping. He has a lot of other activities. MD of the ATC group, which is a business, full services in forward and freight, customs brokers, and so on and so forth. He's chairman of Rotomatic Containers, which is manufacturer of a wide range of useful, attractive, and high-quality plastic Rotomatic model products, and a specialist in dog. And he's volunteered as chairman of IFCR, president, Maharashtra Chamber, vice president of AMTOI, which we can see at the background of his his screen. Immediate president of FFAI, vice chairman of CLIP. This is, as I said, he's been there since this. I thought I'll just run this briefly where he has been chairman. The Maharashtra Chamber is one of the most active chambers in Mumbai. The ATC, which he's owned for 38 plus years as an owner and director, and now managing director of ATC Global Logistics. He has been fortunate to have Harvard Business School there, the Indian School of Business, the University of Mumbai, and University of Mumbai for both Bachelor of Sciences. And then he has won a large number of awards apart from volunteer experiences as the chairman of various boards and committees all across the globe. So, the reason I wanted to bring him in was that he is a man who values and appreciates research. A person who has actually, whenever I've spoken to him, when we have met at various forums, has actually appreciated research and brought in research as an outflow. And that is something, as a practitioner, as a person who represents industry, talks about it, is very important, because when he comes in with that feature, he is bound to actually talk about inducing that component in the industrial framework. And this is something which is interesting. And so I thought I should bring in a man who actually can bridge that gap, because ultimately what all we do, whether it is medical or otherwise, or any stream in the world, if it is not industrially applicable, it cannot be reaching the end consumer. It has much little relevance except for reading in libraries and students writing PhD thesis on top of that research and then building onto it. So I thought Shantanu to come in. Shantanu, the floor is yours.
Namaskar, Aman.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, everyone. Yamini and Dr. Agarwal also. Nice to be back to you again, meeting you after a long time. Well, Aman, it said that if you can't be a star, be amongst the stars. Like, research was my passion. I couldn't pursue it. So for me, you are rock stars. So I'm lucky to be with you. So in morning when you spoke, it was in Hindi, as they say, neki aur kuch kuch. So it's a blessing to be with all of you. Yes, I am aware we are at the end of 2.5 hour webinar. So I will stick to time. In fact, I always speak with a timer on. And what I'll try to do is, since we are at the end of 2.5 hour session, I'll try to maintain the interest of all the participants, including speakers, by narrating 2 or 3 as time permits, real life stories about research. All of them are in one particular field, which is astrophysics. And we will try to connect it with the themes which the speakers have presented just now. Like we spoke about publication, we spoke about funding, we spoke about recognition and award, like the time horizon, you spoke about patience for 2 years or more. I will give you stories about how much patience one needs. Well, if we go to the 17th century, the GDP of UK was lower than GDP of India. It was a smaller market, but as an outcome of the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, the British had developed scientific temperament and they highly valued research and development, which includes research in fundamental research, fundamental sciences also. So UK, island nation, rose to be a global power. They could punch above their weight because of their passion for research and development. Now, this is something about, I would say, a message for our political leadership, the visionary political leadership. We have to take note of research and its impact on the history of a nation and what impact they can do. And if we want to take it to the next level, like Americans took it to a much higher level by their industry connect and the synergy they could have. So essentially, I would say that's how we all carry passion. And I would also like that a big seminar like this, I should tell a couple of stories, because in Harvard Business School, we largely relied, or I would say almost entirely relied on case study method. Of course, case study method is not about narrating cases, but it's about the discussion of the cases we narrate. And from those discussions, we have learning. So whatever I'm telling will have impact on how research should be done, both empirical and epistemic or theoretical. If possible, I will share 2 stories, or maybe I will go to third story if I have one. And last part of it is also how it should not be done, though I'm also saying how it should be done. Let's go back 100 years. Sir Arthur Eddington was an English astronomer. He established field of astrophysics. He was a physicist, mathematician. He was a philosopher of science and popularizer of science. So a very outstanding personality and very dominant personality. Eddington wrote a number of articles in English. The Einstein's original work was in German. Eddington wrote it in English and popularized it. And then when he had an opportunity in 1919, he took a expedition for observing solar eclipse to have evidence of relativity. It was about taking results of bending of the electromagnetic waves across the sun and impact of the gravity on the same. A year later, after 1919, he published his results and Einstein's theory stand validated by these results. However, soon it was found that there were too many inaccuracies in the results, and probably it didn't make a statistically significant case. Some accused him of outcome bias and that he was trying to be in support of Einstein, who is such a great leader. And though recently there was some effort to have computer models to justify his results, even after 100 years, it continues to be actually Zilps and it remains controversial after 100 years. Let's take our story of Sir Arthur Eddington forward, and he comes across a young scientist who moved to UK at the age of 19, went by sea over here, and it is Chandrasekhar Subramaniam, the famous Chandrasekhar for Chandrasekhar limit. And you know there is a telescope, X-ray telescope in the sky named after him. He went on to become the most popular scientist in America for a good time. And he has doctoral students under him, and his students have Nobel Prize, not just him. Chandrasekhar brought together quantum mechanical theory of Fermi-Dirac to show results on white dwarf. What's the limit? It's 1.4 limit comparator to solar mass. And he applied principles of special relativity. In an infamous encounter, after Chandra presented this result, Sir Arthur Eddington, instead of supporting his student, he publicly ridiculed him. And instead of a private dialogue, he managed that he speaks after him and ridiculed him. Though Arthur Eddington was proved wrong in 1972, Chandra turned out to be a hero, but yet a person of brilliance of Chandrasekhar had to move from UK to USA. And similar situation was with others. So if you want to retain talent, we have to learn to accept people with bright ideas, and what Arthur Eddington had objected to is pure mathematical base and merger of relativity with quantum physics. All complicated topics, but none of the quantum physicists could find anything wrong with the model. But like typical common people, great scientists also thought that we are quantum physicists, let us not take our fight to astrophysics. That's a different domain. Let's keep our arguments. And all these people had arguments with Einstein. So they were not faint-hearted. These are the people who argued with Einstein but didn't take up this point. Eventually, Chandrasekhar got Nobel Prize in 1983. So almost 50 years. So we speak of 1 year, 2 years, 5 years to get recognition. Chandrasekhar got Nobel Prize in 1983. Now let's take this story ahead. In fact, if Arthur Eddington had open mind, he would have been able to predict for his brilliance degenerate matter and what we today known as neutron star or a black hole. So again, if we take this story further, Chandrasekhar is now famous. He is editor. I think Aman is the editor of his paper. And there is a young scientist, Eugene Parker, who submitted a paper for discovery of solar wind in 1957. This was rejected by two eminent reviewers, and it came to Chandrasekhar as a editor. He saw that mathematically it was a very sound theory. He did publish it, and of course, after 5 years, not too long, the theory was validated, and now we understand the solar corona quite well. If we take these few stories, 2 or 3 stories together, we can find that there will be challenges in coming out with radical research or important research, but it is such research that takes you to the next level and you become a global influence. People who are pliable and compliant did not necessarily compete on empirical side or be it epistemic based. I have given you examples of both epistemics and empirical evidence. Many of you are in a position to influence or decide what can be published or not, what should be funded or not. I thought I should share these 3 examples in research and publication, and probably it helps the young people to stay motivated, and maybe there is a message we can draw. And as in Harvard Business School review a case study method, maybe these 3 cases become excellent candidates for discussion about how research has to be done and not done. With this, thanks again. Thank you, Aman, for this opportunity. It's great to be with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Shantanu, for that enlightenment. I'm happy that you brought that astrophysics perspective, because it was important that that astrophysics perspective comes. We're missing physics part, and as I said, I wanted all spheres to come in. I would like all my speakers to join in, but I have one more speaker to speak, who is Professor Agarwal, who will be giving the vote of thanks and a little bit insight on all the speakers of what they have said, and a little bit add to his own perspective. But before I go to Saurabh, I would like, if I can introduce him briefly, just take a second to introduce him, and then we go to you, Saurabh. Just give me a second, please. Saurabh has his PhD from Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, and MPhil from Delhi School of Economics, and then MCom from Delhi School of Economics. And then, as I've read, he is on the board of various government agencies and Ministry of Labor and Employment. And he is also currently the principal of IIF College of Commerce and Management Studies, which is a sister institution of Indian Institute of Finance. He is sought after. He is a visiting faculty and professor for doctoral work and doctoral students at IIMs, IIM Rohtak and one more IIM, and then is also a visiting professor at Faculty of Management Studies, where he did his PhD from. He has, as I've read already, he has been at various board levels. He's on various companies and government organizations. He's published with Palgrave, UK, Lamberg, and various other agencies. His work is on securities and extensively portfolio management, and His research, 19 papers have been published, edited book, 2 books, research monography. He's publishing more books now during the time of lockdown, and also got the Best Paper Award from the Institute of Management Ahmedabad in 2010. He's chaired and addressed various conferences. He again appears on a large number of television interviews on All India, on Lok Sabha TV, on Rajya Sabha TV. He has come. Then he has also been on CNBC, ABP, then on ZTV, Zee Hindustan, various TV channels, which he has been coming for quite some time. He also has a publishing company called Edge India Publishing Limited. And as I showed you, these are some of the members were raised, members of various organizations across the country. And he has participated and addressed various training programs. With that, I would now request for Saurabh Agarwal to deliver the vote of thanks. Before that, after that, we will open the house for questions. I would request whoever wants to ask a question, may kindly raise hand. We will contain the questions to about 5 to 10 minutes. We were a 2-hour session. We have exceeded by about 25 minutes, but I think that's within limits, given that we are running around a technology platform. And we are happy that everyone did complete whatever they wanted to say. With that, I will now go, and I request all speakers to kindly keep their videos on, because we would like to take some pictures of all of you together. And I will now request Professor Saurabh to present the vote of thanks and maybe add a few words of his own knowledge of wisdom, because he's a serious researcher himself and is very coveted in terms of what he does. Professor Saurabh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Aman. I must convey my deep regards and thank all the speakers for taking out time from their schedule of teaching, research, and practicing. I would like to now summarize the main points of the speakers. I'll start with their area. Before we start the research, rather than preparing it at the end, he talked about the attention to the supervisor and the university research. He also talked about articles in press. After Professor Agarwal, we had Professor Charles. Professor Charles talked about from his large amount of experience which he has had, strategy. He essentially talked about the funding for research, which I think is very important, because good research requires a lot of good funds. He also talked about how to get good publications, and he talked from his experience of publishing. After Professor Charles, we had Thenmozhi. Also laid emphasis on need of meta-analysis in finance. She also raised issues for issues which are pending and which research scholars can focus on for further and future research in finance. She also focused on research profession, becoming medical research He talked about relevance of H index. I'm sorry, there is some problem in.
Saurabh, go ahead. We can hear. Can you unmute yourself and go ahead? Can you unmute yourself, Saurabh, please?
Is it
Go ahead,
now
please.
audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
So he talked about H index and various other indexes which are available for research, and practical research which is having impact, which was also one of the major points raised last time, that yes, research, high publication, but is it having a very important impact? After that, we had Dr. Yamini Agarwal, who also focused on the various rankings like H index. She also talked about the various sources like the CMI, Provis, BSc, NSE sources. She talked about the theoretical framework to empirical research. And lastly, she gave a word of advice that do not put too much data in your research. Finally, we had our valedictory address by Mr. Shantanu, who talked about how case studies, he gave some examples and case studies and motivated researchers to look forward for research. With this, with the deep sense, I thank all the speakers for taking out time from their busy schedule and making their views available to the research scholars and researchers part of IIF family, and to the world at large who are listening to us through Facebook or other mediums on YouTube. It will be there. So thank you to all. And now again, I would like to hand over to Professor Aman.
Thank you, Saurabh, for that insight. I'm very thankful to everybody to have spared their time. And as I said, I would request everybody to raise hands. I only see one or two hands as of now, but everyone wants to raise hand. We will try and see if we can get the questions from Facebook. There are almost about 50 plus people who have been watching us on Facebook Live as well from across the globe. And so we will take up. I do see more hands come up. I would request all speakers to be here so that we can take up their questions. I will go to Dr. Nilesh Mehta first, and then I'll go to Dr. Dharmendra Mehta, and then forward on. So I will request Dr. Naveen Mehta, to kindly open his video and then his audio, and then kindly introduce himself before he asks his question. And if he has a specific question to a particular professor or editor, he can raise it. Otherwise, in general, whichever way he likes. Please introduce yourself, Dr. Mehta. We can't hear you, Dr. Mehta. Yes. Please,
hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. This is Dr. Naveen Mehta. I am former Dean and Head, Sanchi. I'm working right now as an associate professor over there. I am really thankful to the organizing committee for giving me this chance to provide, to ask certain questions. But due to the paucity of time, I'm going to ask only one question. The question is related to, theoretical research. People are more tend to do, empirical research, exploratory research, but in the field of literature and language, especially, we are more interested in doing theoretical research. So I would like to ask if there are any good journals in the conceptual this world where we can, write our papers in the Scopus or high index journal, and even the validity of our research can be covered. This is my question to, especially to Professor Charles. High index journal in language and literature, especially.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. Thank you for your question. But I must confess that I'm not at all familiar with this field of research, so I could not really provide you with a significant answer for that. I'm really only familiar with economics and finance, so I apologize for that.
Okay, no issues, sir.
Would anyone else would like to take a call on it? Yes, yes. Professor Agarwal, if you can unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes.
Very good question, Dr. Mehta. Sir, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? Please go ahead.
Very good question, Dr. Mehta. There are several journals which publish theoretical research. For instance, Journal of Mathematical Finance is one such journal. Then there are certain Journal of Finance, American Economic Review, Journal of Economic Perspective. These are a few of them. Finance India also accepts theoretical articles which are theoretical in nature. My own work is building up a model, goal programming model and stochastic goal programming model for capital budgeting decisions. Yamini has also done some research using stochastic goal programming model on capital structure decisions and also empirically testing the model developed by her. So there are theoretical models which are being developed and are being used even in India. And in any case, we welcome in Finance India theoretical research papers.
Thank you, Professor Agarwal, for that insight. In any case, we do not have a person from English or literature background, and we will try to bring in someone in our forthcoming webinars from this field as well, and maybe take it up from there on to talk about which could be these journals in the area of English literature and other sciences. I would like to now go to the second person, Dr. Dharmendra Mehta, who wanted to ask a question. I will ask, kindly open up your video and also unmute yourself, sir. Mr. Dr. Mehta, if you can kindly introduce yourself from where you are and what you do, and then ask a question, please.
Yes. Good evening, sir. Myself, Professor Dr. Dharmendra Mehta from Ujjain, a city, 5,000-year-old city of Ujjain. I am speaking, and my question is to very senior and learned Professor Dr. Agarwal, sir, Dr. J.D. Agarwal, sir. Sir, young faculty members are finding difficult, and they are getting more and more confused about the paid journals and the unpaid journals. There is a very flood of the journals right now all over India, and I think lots of agencies, lots of institutions are impressing upon, insisting upon that so-and-so category in so-and-so, category XYZ. So being a very legend in your own field, sir, really we salute you. We always hear a lot of good lectures and your papers. But I have a simple question. As a young faculty, how we should motivate the students and young scholars about this confusion of paid journals versus free journals? Please throw light.
Please unmute yourself, sir.
There are three categories of journals being published at the moment. You rightly pointed out there are paid journals. Now the number of such journals is increasing. They charge you, and then you can publish your journal there. Their objective or view is that the journals do not get financing and therefore they have to finance the publication of the journal. But I understand such journals do not really carry much value in the academic world. There is a third category of journal. I will come to the first category later. That is, they do not accept any fees at all because they are always in short of articles. They keep on requesting people for submission of articles. Whatever article they receive, they just publish. These are generally new journals or who do not carry much value. For instance, if they are not Scopus Index, if they are not in the list of UGC journals and so on and so forth, or they do not carry much market value as such. The first category of journals is those who do not charge any fees, but they ask for submission fee. And that has been done primarily, most of the journals in America did that because they found a large number of journals were coming to them, articles were coming to them, or research papers were coming to them, and it was difficult for them to process all the articles because they follow a principle where at least 2 blind reviews are done. The journals, research papers are sent to 2 professors or researchers who give their opinion, and it is a blind review. Now that has a cost. And then also to discourage people to send any article which they do not think, which they think this is not really very good, but let me send it. Now to discourage that kind of articles also, submission fee is being charged. Such submission fee is very small generally. We in Finance India also introduced submission fee. We do not charge any publication fee and we finance the operations ourselves. The submission fee, let me tell you, Dr. Mehta, is only a fraction of the cost which we incur to process the article and revert back to the author. I hope your query is answered.
Would anyone else like to respond to it? Yes, Thenmozhi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think you can ask the researchers to send it to some good journals rather than the paid journals. I think though even now UGC or even Scopus index journals are there. They don't charge, so you can choose such type of journals and then publish it rather than going in for the paid journals. Though it's I think you get some quick publications, but that will not be the motivation for you to publish in such type of paid journals. You're always looking for there are good journals which actually go through the review process and which will be of value for you as well as for the students in the future also. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Thenmozhi. Anyone else would like to respond to that question? Would anyone else like to? I think Indrasari wanted to respond, but I think she just logged out. Let me just check. She's logging in again. Would you like to respond to it, Meithiana, about this question which was asked? Would you like to respond to it as well? Or give the scenario of publication in Indonesia about how it is with regard to top journals or paid journals or, and so on and so forth. Meithiana, if you like to respond to it as well. Okay, so I will take this call now. This is the last question, and we would like to go from here on. So I would like to thank everybody, but before I would like to just respond briefly to this question which was asked and tell you about our process itself in the Finance India. It's important that you look at the journal, the quality of the journal, who are the editors, what are they publishing, what is the journal. Kindly see the hard copy if it's possible, or the soft copy, whatever it is, before you actually submit a paper. As Professor Agarwal identified, that there is very little amount which is actually given by any organization for publication of research journals. As a result, they need to raise their own fundings, which are there. And it becomes very difficult for most journals to go about raising funds. I can only tell you the journal we bring out, which is Finance India, has, we receive almost about a paper every day from across the globe, about 10 to 12 about 8 to 10 papers from overseas, and the balance from within the country. We follow a 2-tier review process in which tier 1 is checking plagiarism as well as a full professor from the institute reviewing it. And in tier 2, we have 5 full professors reviewing for us, out of which 3 are from overseas and 2 from within the country, and which are not from the institute. And the whole process on an average takes about 8 to 10 months, with minimum being 6 months and a maximum being about, we've been able to reduce it last year to 12 months, but earlier it was 15 to 18 months on an average of last 3 years. Now, a lot of scholars these days do not have the patience to actually wait. They want it. They will call us and ask if we can pay something to get it published earlier. And let me tell you, it doesn't work at all, because we have to go through this review process. And Thenmozhi knows about it. We like it or not, but Thenmozhi knows about the way we work. She has seen it happen with her own papers as well. We have had rectors who have been on our editorial board. Some of their papers have actually been sent back for review. My own paper, which was submitted long back with a colleague of mine from Singapore, and from another who was a vice chancellor of a university in Australia called the ANU, Australian National University. That paper was actually sent back. The paper took 5 years because we had to resubmit, and then we had to resubmit again. And this is despite the fact that I am the executive editor of the journal. So despite that fact, my paper, which is co-authored with 2 other people who are very senior, one who was the dean of a school in Singapore, another one who is the vice chancellor of a university, the top university in Australia, that paper got sent back twice. So it is not that, there is that time which it takes, and that's what builds up the reputation, which is built up with the journal. But then you need to look at it depending on what time frame you have in hand, what you want to do. But please look at the fact that, what is to be done and what is not to be done, because there are so many journals today, and this UGC Scopus has just come. They have not been there. There have been agencies like the JEL, the cables, which have been there for 30 years. I know journals which are very top quality journals in the country and even outside the country, which are nowhere in Scopus or even Web of Sciences or such UGC lists which are there. But there are some top quality journals, because of the contribution they've made, and they're known within the academic circles, and they are being taken up by the universities in their respective countries. So I would request that you must look at it, connect with your colleagues and ask them about it as to what is a good journal, especially your supervisors, your advisors, and people you meet at various conferences like Charles and Thenmozhi, who address various forums. When you meet these people like Bhaskar, who goes around, who has published 250 papers, when you ask them, then you come to know exactly, which is a good journal, because they have actually gone the hard way and they've learned the hard way. And it becomes easier for you to actually look at it, but have patience, which a lot of young people today do not have. I understand the academic requirements, and we don't mind. We tell our people who submit to us that if you want to withdraw, you're welcome to withdraw, but this is the time frame we are looking at. And even after that, let me tell you, my dear friends, 78% rejection is there in a regular issue journal, which is there. And so people feel disheartened, but then we send them papers back and they do it. But it's a regular process of top journals. I can only say it's not the years, but then the quality. I remember Journal of Political Economics, which published Bob Merton's work on derivatives, which won him the Nobel Prize. It was a volume #1. And that work was actually rejected twice by 2 different journals before it would finally get a yes. And then it was actually the Nobel Prize winning paper in derivatives, in option pricing. Similarly, Harry Markovich, everyone in finance would know about portfolio theory, don't put your eggs in the same basket. And that paper also, that his thesis was actually turned down 2 or 3 times by professors. His own thesis was turned down, and then the same thesis won him the Nobel Prize. So, it takes time. Good research takes time. You get value for it. And that's where Bhaskar, when he said the quality, when his presentation, quality does make that impact in terms of quantity, but both of them are required, because when we look at academic growth and physical growth, both of them are required. A balance of both is required. You can't just build on quality and publishing. Like I remember Dr. Manmohan saying, when his biography came when he was a prime minister, it said he had only published 1 paper or 1 book or so. And, everyone knows him as an economist around the world. So one can go and say that, 1 paper makes him an economist. It's something which is a big deal, but then he is known as a very prominent economist. He has done very good wonders for the country and for various international agencies where he's had, even including the RBI, which he headed. With that note, I would like to thank everyone here, my guests. I would like to thank Shantanu, Charles, Dr. Thenmozhi, Meithiana, who was unable to join because of internet problem, Saurabh, Yamini, Professor Agarwal, to have spared your time being with us. The webinar would be online and would remain online. It will go on YouTube as well. It's on Facebook already. It will go on YouTube as well in another a day or so, and we will send you the link, and it will be available for everyone to listen and benefit from. And as a constructive thing. We have wanted to create this framework where knowledge could be shared and people can have access to it, and bring some people I've known for good 20, 25, 30 years who are at the pinnacles, who are at high excellence in their areas. And fortunately, I take leverage of my position because I know that they would not say no to me. I take advantage of that position, and I will take advantage of everyone else, especially Bhaskar again, because I saw he has a paper in AI, and I will want to bring him, not in the one which we are doing the other day, but later on AI, which we want to do. But I will trouble every one of you again, and I hope you will agree to be at our forums. Just in a second, I will close the session now. I would like to just show that what we have in store for people. We have a webinar workshop on artificial intelligence and the society, which is scheduled on Tuesday, where we have 2 authors and others talking about it. Then we're going to hold large number of them workshops on these areas, which are mentioned below. We are holding these series of webinars on essence of life, leaders of growth, and the women of 21st century, recognizing. And last slide for today, which is the artificial intelligence in the society, is something which we're going to hold on Tuesday. If you're wanting to join, please join us. Welcome. In any case, you can join through Facebook, you can join through Zoom, and otherwise we'll put it on our YouTube channel called IIF News and Broadcasting, which will be there live as long as YouTube allows it to be live for going on. And this program was going live on Facebook. We had over 100+ people who were attending this program at different courses of time. And now I would like to thank everyone and close this session. Namaskar, Dhanyavad, Jai Hind, and Vande Mataram.
Good evening, everybody.
Charles,
Thank you.
Hi, Charles. How are you?